Okay, let's get going. Welcome to the November 15th, 2022 regular meeting of the Arbor Planning Commission. For detailed information on reading procedures, please review the full printed agenda. Mr. Leonard, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Gibrandal.
Present.
Commissioner Abrams.
Here.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Here.
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Here.
Commissioner Dish.
Here.
Commissioner Lee. Here. Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Oh, the gang's all back together.
All right. May I have a motion to approve the agenda? Commissioner Lee, seconded by Commissioner Mills. Any discussion? None? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. All righty, minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 20th, 2022 meeting? Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Dish. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Okay, let's see. We are on to reports from city administration, city council, planning manager, and the like. Commissioner or Councilmember Dish?
Yes, it is my pleasure to tell you that TC1 on Stadium in North Maple passed, second reading. The North Maple Village annexation was approved. I was trying to get them to approve the site plan as well, but that was not on the agenda. The pros plan distribution has been approved. And I don't know if you're interested in this, but 2 exploratory resolutions regarding downtown land use were passed, exploratory resolutions. One exploring the feasibility of public restrooms in downtown, and the other exploring the feasibility and sustainability of activating the library lot with food trucks. And both of those were passed. And did I leave anything out, Mr. Leonard?
Sorry. No report from the planning manager this evening.
And no report for you either?
Correct.
Okay, all righty,
Yeah, and Commissioner Dish covered everything as well.
all righty, okay. Any other commission members have anything to report? Liaisons, things like that? Okay. All righty, we will move on to item number 6, which is public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about an issue that is not presented or not listed on the public hearing of this agenda. We'll call first on individuals present to address the commission, and then remote participants to speak during the public hearing. Press star 9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if you're viewing through the web link. Let's see. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. To unmute, press star 6. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sound so that we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present who would like to speak on something that is not on the agenda tonight? All righty. Anybody who is waiting remotely?
We do. Adam Juskevich, you have 3 minutes to address the planning commission.
Hi, Adam Juskevich here on Las Vegas Drive. I don't really have a comment. I just want to mention the Zoom feed. The picture is not showing up. It does show up on the YouTube feed, however. So I just wanted to
Thank you for that. No, that's very, very helpful. We will pass that technical information along.
The audio is working. It's just I think the CTN, like the blank image of the CTN is like full screen, so it's like not showing up. So
Okay.
yeah. All right.
Great. Thank you so much for calling in and letting us know that. All righty. So we will move on now to our regular business, which is, and start with item 8A. This is item number 22-1869, which is 2118 Victoria Circle, annexation and zoning for city council approval a request to annex this .4-acre single-family parcel into the city of Ann Arbor from Ann Arbor Township to obtain public utilities and to zone the property R1A single-family dwelling. It's in Ward 1. Staff recommendation is approval. Do we have some sort of presentation tonight on this? Mr. Leonard?
Jeff Kahn should be joining us in a moment here. And while he provides an overview of the petition, I'm going to go see if I can see what the status of our video feed is.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I can give a brief presentation. I can tell you what I'm seeing now is just an image of myself and an image of Brett, but we can't see anybody else, which is an improvement of what we were looking at just a minute or two ago, which is just a blank screen. So back to 2118 Victoria Circle, pretty straightforward annexation zoning in Ann Arbor Township, just west of Newport Road on Victoria Circle. The petitioner would like to annex into the city of Ann Arbor to access city water and sanitary sewer services. The site's a little less than 0.4 acres, consistent with the long-range land use plans, and staff is recommending approval.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty, so we will move on to the public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about this annexation. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak, please press *9 if listening by phone, or use the raise the hand feature if viewing through the web link. Phone access is 877-853-5247, and meeting ID is 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hands using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available through, if accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. For either method, please state your name and address at the beginning of the comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak on this annexation? All righty, looks like nobody. Is there anybody remote that would like to speak on this?
Nope.
Okay, I will read the motion then. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the annexation in R1A, single-family dwelling district zoning of 2118 Victoria Circle. Moved by Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Lee. Any discussion? Commissioner Dish.
I have one question, and I just, it's possible I'm misreading something. But does it say in the zoning regs that you excerpted for us in the report that 20,000 square feet minimum is required for this zoning designation, and this project is 17,163 square feet?
Yes, the site would be considered existing non-conforming, which would allow them to construct a home, but it would be non-conforming with regard to lot size. We see this throughout the city, being a 19th century city. We see neighborhoods that might have a single zoning district, but numerous lots may be non-conforming with regard to the minimum lot size. So that's a good catch, and we would consider it to be an existing non-conforming condition and would allow a single-family home to be built.
That's great. I mean, we are not a fan of large minimum lot sizes, so I think that's completely reasonable. I wanted to ask about the public storm sewer. You mentioned that water and sanitary sewer services are available, though the sanitary hookup is probably going to be expensive and kind of a design challenge. But I wondered, what happens when public storm sewers not available? Do they have to do alternatives with drainage or detention and retention, or?
Right. They're not currently required to provide detention, so to speak. Victoria Circle is a dirt road that had been in the township for decades. And over time, the city public services group improves roads and provides services such as stormwater. My guess is that stormwater may eventually be provided to streets like Victoria Circle over time, but it'll take a while to get there. So our engineers typically will indicate whether storm sewer is available or whether it's not available, just as a matter of public record. We don't require, in this case, a petitioner to connect to the storm, the city storm main, because it doesn't exist. But at such time in the future, if storm mains were to be constructed in Victoria Circle, they would be designed to accommodate stormwater from each of the property owners.
Okay, and there's no concern about flooding?
Not that I know of. This is a fairly slopey part of town. Just immediately to the north is Riverwood, and so stormwater would be flowing toward the north from this property. There are actually stormwater detention ponds just to the north. Just to the west is Riverwood. Newport Creek is to the north, and they also have a stormwater system established. So I have not heard of any stormwater problems, in part because it's a fairly slopey neighborhood where water tends to not stand very, very long in any one spot.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
So, excuse me, so I don't have the dimensional tables totally memorized, so I'm looking at it now. I'm just curious, why not zone it R2A?
The reason.
Or something that could allow more than one dwelling unit, thank you.
Yeah. The reason that we are supporting the R1A zoning is because it's consistent with all the other lots that have already been annexed along Victoria Circle, which have been zoned R1A. So I think that is a really good question that lends itself to maybe a much larger story or a much larger issue, which is, are we okay with R1A minimum lot
Right.
sizes? Should we consider dropping those to something less than that, like 10,000 square feet? I think that's a really great question. I would say instead of focusing on one lot that would create sort of a spot zoning situation, I think it's would be a great undertaking to look at that issue citywide.
Like in the comprehensive planning process, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah, because to give us the most flexibility, it would be nice to be able, not even just the lot size, but to be able to allow to build, more than one unit
Yeah.
on that site anytime in the future, so. All
Yeah,
right, thank you.
sure.
Any other discussion? Alrighty, we ready for a vote then? I think we can probably do this as a group, so all in favor?
No,
Or
it
do
is.
we have to do roll call?
Yeah, it is
Okay, let's do roll
forwarding our
call.
land use recommendation.
Okay. Alrighty. Mr. Leonard?
Commissioner Gibrandal,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé,
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
I know you're getting there. Commissioner Dish? Commissioner Lee?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Weich?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Before you
Commissioner
go
Weich.
on to the next one, did we skip the public hearings, number 7?
No? You did. Or for
We
the-
did it? So there are no
Oh,
public
I'm
hearings on
sorry.
December 2nd?
Maybe I did. I think you're right.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, of what's, so we will go back a notch.
Sorry.
No, thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Public hearings for next week.
There are no new public hearings scheduled for December 6th.
Ah, got it. See, I knew that. That's why I skipped it. All righty. Okay, so we are on to item 8B then, which is 22-177. 2520 and 2540 Pontiac Trail annexation. The petitioner is proposing to annex two parcels from Ann Arbor Township into the city of Ann Arbor that total 5.897 acres located on the east side of Pontiac Trail. The parcels are intended to be added to the Village of Ann Arbor site plan in the future. The petitioner is intending to eventually request R4A, multiple family zoning. Staff recommendation is approval. Do we have a presentation on this tonight from the petitioner or from staff?
The petitioner is joining us via Zoom. Tim Laughlin indicated that he would join us via Zoom, so maybe we can promote him as a panelist. If he's there.
So he will be presenting?
It looks like he's
Tonight?
joining us now.
Okay, and then, okay.
Yeah, so he may want to give us a brief presentation.
Mr. Laughran, anybody else from your team you would like to be promoted?
No, just
Okay.
myself.
You have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you. It's nice to see you all, even though I can't really see anybody but Jeff. It's good to see you all again. I don't have a presentation tonight. As you all know, this is really the last two parcels of our Village of Ann Arbor development, which will be at Pontiac Trail and DuBarn. This is what we've been calling the Four Sheep property, and that is the last parcels on Pontiac Trail. I don't have anything to show you from the last time I came in front of you about 6 weeks ago. We are moving forward with our site plan amendment, which would incorporate this parcel and the Murphy parcel to the north of this. So hopefully I'll have something submitted that we can share with you. And frankly, I think everybody should be happy with the results, especially with the additional open space that we're going to be adding to the project. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but at this point, I don't have anything else to share. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Khan, do you have anything to add to that? Or
Just wanted to reiterate that Mr. Laughlin's project, the Village of Ann Arbor, came in before you. You held two public hearings on it, about 67 acres, quite a few hundred residential units, both owner-occupied and rental. The petitioner is acquiring these additional sites off of Pontiac Trail, which include the two before you today, 2520 and 2540 Pontiac Trail. And they also already petitioned to annex 2600, and that was successfully annexed. So after your recommendation tonight, we'll take this petition for these two parcels to City Council for their approval of the annexation, and then send it off to the state for their release. Then at some point in the future, as Tim mentioned, he is planning on bringing an amended site plan back to you, which will not only include the 67 acres that you've already seen, but it'll include improvements based on the acquisition of these three parcels along Pontiac Trail. So you're going to see the whole enchilada, hopefully within a few months. So that's what I had to add.
Great, thanks. Okay, well, let's move on then to the public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about this annexation. We'll first call in individuals who are present, and then remote participants. To speak during the public hearing remotely, press star 9 if listening by phone, or use the raise the hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. For either method, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anybody present who would like to speak on this petition?
Thank you, Chair Gibrando. My name is Ken Garber, and I live at 28 Haverhill Court. This annexation should go forward. This is a massive project. I don't need to remind you. I think the original plans called for 561 units. it will have a tremendous impact, climate impact on the city. Each time an annexation comes up, and I think this is at least the fourth time, I make the same statement, so my apologies for the repetition. But this project really needs to go all electric for the entire project. The developer very graciously changed its plans, its original plans, and has agreed that the 320 single-family homes, I may have that wrong, are to go all electric, but the rental portion will remain with gas furnaces, gas furnaces. Mr. Laughlin was nice enough to meet with a group of citizens back in late September. We talked about this at length. I realize this is unusual for Robertson Brothers to do this. It raises some uncertainties for the company, but it really makes no sense at this point in the climate crisis to go forward with gas in new construction. And I'm pretty confident that Robertson Brothers can find a way to do this and still maintain the economic viability of the project. So again, my apologies for predictability and repetition, but since I've got Mr. Laughlin on the line, I just thought I'd reiterate that this is not just my concern, but pretty much the concern of the entire climate action community in Ann Arbor. So I support this project. I think we all do. We want to see it move forward. The city needs more housing. It's a good developer. Just need you to take this one additional step. So we look forward to hearing that when it comes back, when the amended site plan comes back to Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else present that would like to speak on this petition? Is there anybody in the queue remotely, Mr. Leonard?
There's not.
Okay, so I will read the motion, which is this: Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the annexation of 2520 Pontiac Trail and 2540 Pontiac Trail. Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Dish. Any discussion? Commissioner Dish.
Is it okay if I ask a question of Mr. Lofgren? Am I allowed to do that?
I would
Thank
think
you.
so, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to know, I thought it was great that Mr. Garber, and that you met, that at Mr. Garber's request, you met with a number of concerned residents about this development, and you talked more about what your concerns were about making an all-electric development. And I wondered if you would be willing to share some of the reasons that you presented at that meeting.
It was really, I mean, basically the same as what we discussed before in the last Planning Commission meeting, just from a, from an economic standpoint. I will say we learned a lot out of that meeting. I'm very glad we did that. There's been some follow-up meetings. In fact, we've sent a couple of our executives actually flew out to Arizona for a seminar specifically for these types of, discussions. So I think we've learned a lot. This is still our position, and I, hopefully that's respected. We have come a long way, but at this point we're basically the same as what we'd shown you before. However, I will say after meeting with Mr. Garber and his team, we're certainly willing to continue to have the conversation open. So there might be other ways to meet some of the goals that we're still exploring. So hopefully that, I don't know if that answers your question completely or the answer you wanted, but we are keeping an open mind.
No, I was just looking for if there was anything else besides I understood that your economic concerns, were that it could make you less competitive on the rental market for the rental housing. And I do appreciate that you are reclaiming a site that has sat empty for a really long time and that has a landfill on it that's leaking methane, which isn't very far from my house. So I'm pleased that will be different. And I I understand that there are a lot of factors in play here. I wish that this outcome could be different, but I do understand that we're in a period of transition, and I am grateful for how far you have come with the single-family homes. And as I say, I wish that it could go further, but I did want to express, I see a lot of public benefits. There's also a lot of park that you're creating here, and you're taking some pressure off of a road that leads to a very popular recreational amenity, so a private road that leads to a popular recreational amenity. So there are many ways in which this project can improve the neighborhood. And of course, we all look forward to the possibility of a roundabout if the federal money comes through for that. So I know that you've really tried to offer what you could to offset what you feel you can't offer. And so I would thank you for that.
I appreciate those words. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All righty, let's get on with the roll call vote then.
Commissioner Gibrandal,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé,
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Dish,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner White.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
Thank you.
CTN and our IT department are great. I don't know that I can solve the feed problem, but I would, if the commission is agreeable, I would like to suggest about a 10-minute break so I can work with them to see if we can get the feed going on Zoom for those. For those that are listening via Zoom, my apologies that you're not seeing the visuals. As a reminder, you can see the visuals through our online CTN live stream. It's available through the a2gov.org website. It's actually, I think if you Google basically City of Ann Arbor YouTube live feed, you can also see the visuals through that. But I understand it'll be a little challenge to navigate the call-in on Zoom and that. But if we could take about a 10-minute break, I don't know that I'll be able to fix it, but it'll be our best chance.
That sounds good to me.
Okay, so maybe we
So-
could reconvene about 7:40?
That sounds perfect. Okay.
right.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting back to order here. Looks like we have our feed back together, which is great. Thank you for suggesting that break to address that. We are moving on to item 8C, which is 530 North Division. This is a project that I worked on, so I need to recuse myself. So I'm handing the reins over to Vice Chair Abrams. So I will be leaving the meeting, and you all can carry on.
Okay, so we're on to item 8C. I'll begin by reading, introducing the petition from the agenda. So this is for 530 North Division, a proposal to add a rear addition to the existing house and rezone this structure from R4C Multiple Family Dwelling District to PUD, Planned Unit Development, to construct an approximately 8,000 square foot house containing 4 dwelling units with 6 bedrooms per unit. The PUD zoning is proposed to modify building setbacks, conflicting land use buffers, driveway width, landscaping, and open space requirements in exchange for an energy efficient and sustainable building. And the staff recommendation is for approval. So we'll begin with a petitioner presentation followed by staff presentation.
Am I supposed to take my mask off? No?
No, you can leave it on. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Doug Selby. My wife Jenny and I bought this house in 2001. At the time, it was severely blighted. A lot of drug activity in there, and vagrants were sleeping in one of the units with some kicked out windows. Safe to say it was one of the worst houses I've ever been in. We fixed it up as best we could, but I knew someday it would have to be majorly rebuilt or just replaced. The structure is not in great shape. It's located at the entrance to the Broadway Bridge, which is a historic meeting place for Native Americans and the German immigrants who would build the city. And it's in the Old Fourth Ward Historic District. The project was conceived to connect our shared Ann Arbor history to a carbon neutral future, which is not an option if our city and civilization are to continue. And for that reason, I'm calling the project The Bridge. We began planning this with the city in 2017. The lot and the buildings have morphed all over the place in the last 180 years. It's changed shape, the lot and the buildings. In fact, the building now is 2 houses that were kind of smashed together under a common roof line, and the 2 sort of traditional looking houses you see there are the footprints of those houses. As you can imagine with a house like that, there were variances aplenty. There are 6 or so of them, and you can see those in your packet, 6 or 8. We had the choice to either go by right, and we would have had to parlay all of those to a yes vote to win approval of the project. So in order to avoid that, we went with a PUD. I would like to say that I think a lot of the variances, although all of them were pretty minor, a lot of them really don't make a lot of sense. There would be the same required if this was a 400-unit complex on 20 acres as it was for a small 4-unit apartment in an urban lot. But in any case, we're making almost all the variances better with what we're doing, and we're certainly matching the neighborhood character and creating something that fits here pretty neatly. The bridge will be the most sustainable apartment ever built in Ann Arbor, but hopefully not the last. There's too many features to go through in the short time I have here, but just kind of skimming over the mountaintops, it's net zero energy plus 5%, about 80% less water use than a code-built home, with no loss of experience to the occupants. It's made with all healthy and sustainable products, and we'll be recycling the existing home to a large extent into the new home. The tenants will have incredibly healthy air quality and a high level of indoor comfort. In fact, it's a biophilic building, which means in part that that every tenant can enjoy the outside from within their unit in the apartment. And it's a source of food for pollinators and birds that use the Huron River Flyway as part of the landscaping. It's 100% pre-wired for electric cars and bikes, but there is a lot of support for alternative forms of transportation, certainly bicycling, and the bus system and everything is pretty walkable right outside the door. We hope to work with the Ann Arbor Student Building Program. These are high school kids from our community that work on houses and learn how to build houses as part of their high school curriculum. We would like to teach them sustainable construction, and we certainly need these workers in the industry pretty badly. The bridge should get a whole bunch of certifications, including Passive House, Living Building Challenge, LEED Platinum, and all of the DOE certifications. So I hope you'll find that it meets the exemplary status with respect to sustainability. And I know this is a lot to gloss over in a short time, but I'm happy to answer any kind of questions you have in detail. I wanted to speak to the why of this project, and as a former chemist, I can tell you that when you have a buffered solution, like our oceans are, you can take a lot of inputs for a long time before changing pH until it can't anymore, and then you get rapid, uncontrollable change. And in this and many other ways, we're really playing with forces we can't control through our carbon emissions. Here's something that's kind of scary, is that half of the excess carbon in our atmosphere now has been put there since the premiere of the show Seinfeld. So we have about 20 years to correct this problem and get to zero emissions, or it's game over for our grandchildren's children and millions of other species as the sixth grade extinction event starts really kicking in. You know, buildings are about 40% of our total carbon emissions, and they're particularly insidious because they bake decades of carbon into emissions into it by fossil fuel appliances and equipment. So my wife and I made the decision early on to do it right or don't do it at all. So a major goal for us was to build this as if our kids' future depended on it, and to try to inspire others to do the same. Of course, not going broke doing it was another major goal, and that's being tested severely. So listen, I wasn't sure what I was going to say in this 10 minutes that you don't know from the packet already, so I've just decided to speak my mind tonight, and I hope that's okay. Saul Griffith, who's an inventor and a green influencer, once said that local bureaucracy is the biggest threat to transition to a sustainable economy. And typically, the more liberal the city is, the worse it will be, ironically. And that's sadly what I've experienced in Ann Arbor. This started 5 years ago, but I'm just here tonight. And granted, there was a pandemic in there, but really, to be honest, I'm surprised I'm here at all, given the number of things that I had to fight through to get past several things that conspired to kill the project along the way. It has strong community support and strong neighborhood support, and the city says this is the kind of development that the city's looking for, so that's kind of baffling to me. And keep in mind that I'm asking to rebuild a failing structure with the exact same number of units that have been on this site since before I was born. It's completely consistent with the underlying zoning and the city's master plan. It's less non-conforming than what exists now, and it crushes every single one of the city's sustainability goals. Frankly, I feel like I should have been here in 2018, and if I had have been, it would have cost about 50% less to plan and build. This has not been a smart financial move for my wife and I, you know, it was almost killed several times after spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get here. I found the process to be unpredictable and capricious. And I don't know how the city expects that we're going to solve this problem if this is what an average homeowner has to go through to make a better property than what exists in the city now. We'll also be forced to spend six figures tearing up the street in front to replace a water main that we've proved to the city that none of the residents will need now or in the future. And we'll probably be destroying the city's brand new bike lane when we do that. So that wasted money has to come from somewhere, and it's part of the reason that Ann Arbor's teachers, hospital staff, our restaurant workers, our young professionals, and our students really can't afford to live here easily anymore. And every one of them is spewing carbon out of their vehicles as they drive here to work or to go to school. So a friend of mine has an email signature that says, if you're in an extinction level event, act like it. I'm far from the only one who's experienced this. It's expensive and really Byzantine to do this work in Ann Arbor, and I just feel like we're running out of time. So I hate to say it, but unless Ann Arbor gets serious about solving this problem when it comes to sustainability and affordability, it's just thoughts and prayers. There's a ton of really great and talented people at the city, and I feel that surely collectively we can find a better way. I should add that there's a lot of really smart and dedicated people who work here that do care. And I know that some of them are just as frustrated with the process as I have been. So I'm hoping that the city has the fortitude to address this. William McDonald once said, if you're trying to get to Canada but driving to Mexico, slowing down doesn't really help. In terms of sustainability, this project is not merely less bad, but is actually made to be regenerative to the site. So in my mind, it represents turning the car around. We tried our best to make something that fits the neighborhood character. We worked with the neighborhood association to make sure it was something that they could live with and liked. And it's the farthest we could go towards true sustainability. But most of all, we really wanted it to be a template for others, because building this way every now and then when somebody decides to do it just isn't going to get us there. So I hope it'll have an impact. We hope you guys like the project, and we hope you'll vote tonight to pass it on to the city council for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I saw Mr. Cheng joining for the staff report.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. Let me see if I can also share my screen. Okay, can you see the site plan?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Let's see, okay. I'll just kind of add on to what Mr. Selby had described with the project. It is about a 0.19 acre site, which is around 9,000 square feet. It's south of kind of where the Broadway Bridge is located. It does have, an existing gravel parking lot, which they're going to formalize into 6 car parking spaces, and I'll move on to another slide there. It does have, in fact, 4 units that are existing, but they total 10 bedrooms, and he's going from 4 units to 6 bedrooms apiece for a total of 24 bedrooms, which was previously mentioned. It is in the historic district. It was approved. And I think the reason probably back in 2018, ultimately why they decided to rezone to a PUD site plan as opposed to going with, just a regular site plan, is that there were several variances that would be required. And those variances include, the conflicting land use buffer, which would have to screen from residential zoning or residential uses, which are to the east and to the south. They also have setback issues to the north and to the front. It's a 25-foot front minimum setback. They're approximately 10 feet. And I think that's at least 12 feet to the north, and they reduced it down to approximately 3.5 feet. They also have a driveway width issue for multifamily. They are proposing a 10-foot driveway, and all of these items would be, can be improved as part of the PUD's supplemental regulations. I'm going to move to another sheet, I think, with the land. So this is the proposed building. You can see it's a retaining wall on the north property line. You can see the outline of the proposed building, especially with an addition to the rear. The total is approximately 9,000 square feet. This is where the 6 parking spaces are to the rear. They will be either EV capable or EV installed. Since this was actually developed, the minimum amount of required parking was 6 parking spaces, but since then we've waived that, but there are 6 parking spaces, which is 1.5 per dwelling unit. There are 3 landmark trees. None of them are really on site. If you can see my cursor, 2 are to the north. 1 is in the public right-of-way. The one in the public right-of-way is not to be removed, but it does have impact, so they have installed mitigation landscaping around the site in case that tree doesn't make it. You can see the mitigation landscaping there, especially along the north property line. There's the conflicting land use buffer. It's probably approximately 5 feet wide. To the east there is just a parking lot. Even though it's zoned R4, it requires a club. It is really just screening from a surface parking lot. There's also residential to the south. They are going to put up a 4-foot long fence minimum that's along the east property line and at least along the drive portion that's screened in this area where my cursor is. They do have a little bit of conflicting land use buffer width there, but of course it's, for the most part, it's a shared driveway with the property owner to the south. I'm probably forgetting some stuff, but I'm here for any questions you may have as part of the PUD supplemental regs. We're attached to the staff report, and I can reference the site plan at any point if you have questions.
Great, thank you. I will now move to the public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about 530 North Division Street, PUD zoning. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, press star 9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present who would like to speak at this time? You can approach the podium. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ed Mahoney, 1413 Shadford Road, Ann Arbor. I have, for 40 years, owned a historic house at 2400 North, at 524 North Division Street, south and adjoining the 530 North Division Street proposed development. I started my family at my 524 North Division Street house and lived there for 9 years. When I am a widow, I plan on moving back and returning. I was a founding member of the Old Fourth Ward Historic District, penned the state documents to create the Historic District non-profit status, and I paid the state filing fee from my own finances at that time. I meticulously restored my wraparound porch back to its original grandeur before the historic district existed. I worked for the Environmental Protection Agency in research, testing, and enforcement, receiving special achievement awards for my work that developed into a national test for truck exhaust emission testing. I have actively reduced the carbon footprint for over 50 years. I completely oppose to changing the zoning so that one individual person can reap a profit. I think the development at 534 North Division Street has been a smoke and mirror project since it began. I was led to believe by Mr. Shelby the existing building was going to stay and rehab back to its 1860 grandeur. In addition added that would be within the original structure's footprint, enclosing the rear porches in the addition. However, the plan shows the complete 3,000 square foot structure, including the basement, will be removed and a new 8,000 square foot building will take its place. Apparently, whomever wrote the rezoning portion for the city was confused also. It states the proposed PUD supplemental regulations allow the following use and configuration of the site. A 3-story addition on the rear of the existing quad complex.
Sir, your time is up. Thank you.
I would like to be able to finish. I am the person that's at the end of I only have another.
Oh, there's a 3-minute limit to each speaker, sir.
Could I continue?
No, I'm sorry. Thank you. Is there anybody else present who would like to speak? You can approach the podium. Thank you.
I appreciate listening. The comments that I have, Sarah Ely, 1413 Shadford Road, have to do with the staff recommendation, and I will unpack it out of order. Taking one of the sentences out of that recommendation will not have a detrimental effect on public utilities or surrounding properties. I don't know how the planning group could purport this without asking adjacent homeowners, that there would be no detrimental effect. It seems overreaching. For example, 416 trips of city service trucks up and down a one-way driveway that's never existed before. That is by research from the Solid Waste Department about what would need to serve this 24-bedroom unit. 4 different service trucks every Monday. One way on North Division Street, which, to the city's credit, has a lot of foot traffic, a lot of bicycle traffic, no bike lane, so I don't know what would get destroyed out front. The bike lane ends almost 2 blocks up, then becomes, a little white line. I really encourage you to walk down there and see the property to get the facts for yourself. By the time you reach about 520 North Division, there's no bike lane. People are riding on the sidewalk, or they're creating traffic, having to pull over to the left because they're riding in the street. And Amazon trucks sit in front of the unit, so we go from 10 bedrooms to 24. One-way driveway, backing up and backing out every Monday. It is a detrimental effect to the neighbors, and I'm afraid to public safety in that area without being dramatic. Provides adequate justification, reading again, for deviation from the master plan. Can Mr. Selby deviate from using the EV-ready carport stalls if only gas-guzzling tenants should sign leases? Can he deviate from achieving net zero? How far can he go from deviating from net zero? As the city rezones, bends a lot of setbacks, makes so many accommodations and exceptions, are there teeth to those promises? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else present who would like to address the commission? You can step to the podium, thanks.
Hello, good evening. My name is Deanna Gilhood, and I'm a tenant at the 530, my address is 532 North Division, within the building of discussion.
I'm Tiffany Dice. I'm also a tenant at 532 North Division Street.
So my housemate and I realized that this project is probably moving forward, and generally we are in favor of this movement. We are both graduate environmental students here at U of M, but we never knew about the project and found out that this building was being renovated by receiving the public hearing notice about this meeting 2 weeks ago. We will unexpectedly be losing our housing, and this is having rippling effects in our lives, including the financial impacts of moving here and having to find new housing unexpectedly. We just wanted to bring up the point that in the bustle of the exciting advances in sustainability projects and housing policy, we must not forget the human side of this issue. These decisions have real implications for the lives and folks in Ann Arbor, and at a minimum, we need to make sure that tenants are being notified as soon as possible about these changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else present who would like to speak?
Thank you, Commissioner Rayburn. It's Ken Garber again. Yeah, as a renter myself in this town, yeah, I feel for the tenants of 530 North Division. This is a really tough time, especially to get back out on the rental market, which I have to do periodically as well. But but mainly I'm here to talk in strong support of this project, which is unusual for me, as you know. It's rare that I wholeheartedly support a development petition, but this is a fantastic project. I didn't know Mr. Selby until just now. I just met him during the break, but I've been following his project from afar for several years, and I'm confident that profit is not his motive here. He's deeply concerned about the climate crisis and wants to make a contribution that can set an example for others in Ann Arbor and elsewhere. So he can speak more to his project than I can, but from what I understand, this is a building built to passive house standards and, more importantly, to living building challenge standards. In other words, it's a building that produces more energy than it consumes. All electric, of course, no gas, with extensive rooftop solar and battery storage, but with a very tight building envelope that breathes using ERV, energy recovery ventilation. It will employ recycled and ecologically friendly materials and modular construction. At least that was the plan earlier. As Mr. Selby just mentioned, it will seek to reuse as much of the original building material as possible and keep and reuse all the stormwater on the site. According to the site plan, this will be one of the most sustainable buildings in the country, but not one of the most expensive. Mr. Selby has said in the past that he doesn't think a net zero building should increase the rental rates beyond market value. Overall, this is a transformational plan for a building that should be a model for rental housing, not just locally, but nationally. So I'm very relieved to see that it's come this far. I was puzzled that it's taken so long. I hope that city officials take Mr. Selby's comments to heart about some of the hoops he's had to jump through, many of which seem to have been unnecessary. Overall, again, please approve this PUD and move it forward to City Council.
Thank you. Is there anybody else present who would like to address the commission? Mr. Leonard, do you see anybody who would like to address us remotely?
We do. Caller with the phone number ending with 751. You can press *6 to unmute your phone and address the commission for up to 3 minutes. Go ahead, caller.
Hello. My name is Chris Crockett. I'm president of the Old Fourth Ward Association, and I've lived in the Old Fourth Ward Historic District for 42 years, only about a block away from this project. So, since the beginning of this project, Doug Selby has consulted with us about his plans, his concept, and all the work that he wanted to do on this site. We've been enthusiastic from the get-go, and we really love this project. I've already sent you a letter expressing the enthusiasm of the Old Fourth Ward Historic District Board, and I must say that Doug Selby is a model of involving the stakeholders in the neighborhood. We met with him on a number of occasions, and also we went before the Historic District Commission to advocate for their approval of this project, which they did. Our neighborhood is the most densely populated neighborhood in all of Ann Arbor, and we have just about 100% turnover of population every year. This is a real challenge, and I'm very sympathetic to the young women who spoke about being displaced. It happens every single year that we have just about 100% turnover. There are very few of us who are owner occupants. We also have to endure a lot of things in terms of city neglect of this neighborhood. And we're hoping that Doug Selby's project will shine a light on the importance of this neighborhood. Kingsley Street, where I live, has been a failing street for about a decade. and yet the city pays no attention to it. We want you to pay attention to how important this neighborhood is and how beautiful it is and what its potential is. Doug Selby is doing that. This is a real sign of hope for this neighborhood. Just as all the people who are owner occupants, long-term residents of this neighborhood have also invested in making our houses more energy efficient, Doug Selby is doing the same here. And we all moved here because we wanted to be in a walkable neighborhood long before it was ever in fashion. It's currently in fashion, but when we moved here, it was not.
30 more seconds.
So I want you to really support this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
No other speakers indicated.
Thank you. So we'll now close the public hearing, and I'll read the proposed motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission recommends that the mayor and city council approve 530 North Division Street Planned Unit Development PUD zoning district and supplemental regulations and the PUD site plan. Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. We can now move to discussion of the proposed motion. Is there anybody who'd like to begin? Commissioner Sauvé?
Thank you for bringing this forward. I believe it is meeting several of our goals in terms of increased density and sustainability. I have maybe a couple of questions for the petitioner. First, could you speak to the timeline for development and the process moving forward relative to your current leases and when the project might start and you vacate?
Yeah, so the leases are up on May 20th, and we would be starting with deconstruction of the house on May 21st.
Okay.
We anticipate, I have 16 months to build it. We think we could build it in 8. It's going to slow down a lot if we have the Ann Arbor student builders there, but I actually think that's a good thing.
Okay. So there's no kind of termination or change of the leases as is, but there's also no kind of renewal opportunity for current tenants, correct?
I would say that I apologize to the young ladies here. We've had email exchange today, but my wife's really good at managing properties, and she did. We've had to move the date back 3 times now, so I think it just kind of fell through the cracks in this particular case, but most of the tenants in the building have been informed and have renewed, knowing that they would have 1 more year there.
Okay.
So I feel bad about that. I'm sorry.
Appreciate it. I had a you talked about it briefly. I'm hoping that you could talk a little bit more, that you've referenced the native past of the neighborhood and the sustainable and net zero, which, sound like historic and cultural practices to be, preserved and introduced. Can you share some more information about that, and then your experience from the historic district and what bounding box of timeline the historic frames as valuable versus the kind of application of your sustainable values to the native history of the area? More so, can you just explain a little bit more if you know about the kind of native history of the area as its kind of intersection?
So down at the bottom of Broadway where the bridge is now, that used to be the spot where you would ford the river. And for, the first probably 40 or 50 years of the city, that was a meeting spot, and that's where the, depot came. And so, it became a place at first where the Native Americans were kind of, would meet with the German settlers who were here, and then later it became a meeting place for, the German settlers. I don't think there's much of that left. So I can't say that we're preserving anything of the native history. There is not really any now. Same kind of for the building itself. One of the reasons that this was able to get a non-contributing status was because there is literally not one material left on the house other than siding under 3 layers of other siding that has no ability to be saved anymore. The rest of it is 2 buildings that were put together. It's not historic because more than 50% of the building was moved there, And the only thing in 1944 that you would have would be the massing and the age of the building, which the Secretary of the Interior's guideline says is not in and of itself enough to call a building historic. So we were successful in getting it delisted as a contributing resource. And from there, you know, we are we are kind of keeping the original footprint of the two houses that were put together there in 1930. And then that's why the back of it is more modern, is to try and sort of working with the people in the neighborhood and especially the architectural historians there, you know, kind of make a hyphen and a different looking building in the back so that it could sort of have the reminder of what the neighborhood used to look like. The roof lines were designed to match the streetscape. The height of the building right now is considerably lower than the other buildings all on either side of it. So we brought that up to match that better so that it would look more consistent with the rest of the neighborhood.
Great. That's
One
helpful.
additional thing I do want to address, Ed, is that there is no garbage trucks. All of the garbage will be out at the street in the containers, the same as it ever was. I've also instituted stations inside each apartment that will help people greatly reduce their trash, I would hope.
Great.
Certainly making it easier for them not to have to carry stuff out all the time and things.
I think I saw like tree trimming notes if needed, but at
Tree
the curb.
trimming
Yep.
is, yep, and then we're removing the telephone pole out front.
Great.
For that reason.
I have two, maybe tweaks, improvement. It was interesting to see, at least in the staff report, the required in terms of existing, sorry, let me go to it real quick. Looked like it was actually the required versus proposed. The required is actually the current, not the required, because it says that no bicycle parking is currently required, but the proposed is Class B and Class C. My understanding is A and C for multifamily, and there's B and C, but of a significant higher amount.
Yeah, there's 12, maximum we could fit in the back was 12 underneath the overhang, and then there's a solar panel awning to keep the bikes dry and make it so that they could be parked outside and locked year round. And then we also put in 4 hoops, and those have an electric charging station so that if anyone has an electric bike, they can charge those too.
That's a great, so that was kind of part of my ask for the EV and vehicle charging stations, was that that's a great way to increase your Class B. And if you've got conduit ready, maybe some typical outlets, if not full EV charging stations, to transition from 6 vehicle parking to fitting even more e-bike spaces within that area. So as a kind of lower level improvement, that carport could do double duty since we don't actually have the parking minimum requirements at this time.
It's an interesting idea. I never thought of that.
As a consideration, especially because the Class B is all wall mounted, and if there's more than 4 e-bikes, which are just a kind of growing trend,
Yeah, you couldn't
it would be
wall mount 'em.
very difficult to
Yeah.
put those on the vertical wall. I also, maybe it's a question for staff, there's no setback maximum, but as I read, one of the benefits of bringing and activating the street is reducing the setback to the front. And
I'm sorry, the setback to the front is meant to match all of the houses going south too. So the building right now is, it's real close to the north property line, and it's actually turned about 11 degrees from the street. So if you look at it, it's kind of like, oh, what's going on there, you know? So we're actually turning it back to the street and then moving it away from that property line.
I'm wondering, because the PUD is going to stay with the land, like if you'd put together a new site development, if we also, there's currently a 10-foot minimum setback, but maybe putting the 25-foot setback maximum to require any property on this project to be at the street. Say if this design doesn't go forward and a new site plan shows up, that it can't be further than 25 feet. So putting a setback maximum continues to encourage and require a building pushed forward to the street. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just kind of naturally fits best on the street. The
Yeah.
Cornwall Mansion to the north is about 50 or 60 feet back. which is a grand old mansion, so it really kind of, it's an estate, you know, and it looks like that. But yeah, to the south, it's very regular. We measured them all, and they're really in line, and then you get to this one, and it's just kind of not.
Yep. So, yeah, those are kind of the things I'd like to maybe see as changes. I'm going to, open this up for discussion, but adding a setback maximum just to kind of overlay in this PUD. And I know, like right now, there's a minimum bike parking that you have on the site, but even saying, and you have the maximum vehicle parking, but, I'd like to see opportunities for that ratio to change. I think the numbers as written in the PUD give you the flexibility in that carport to switch them over to more Class B bike parking. But I wanted to kind of offer that up as an idea as well.
So you would say,
you.
take one of the car bays and turn it into
Yeah,
bike
you can
parking?
put four, 6 parking spots. So that is an opportunity I don't see as an amendment to the PUD, but a maximum setback might be something that I'm going to offer up as a discussion point. I think those are my questions for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? Commissioner Mills?
All right. Thank you very much for this. And thank you for also laying out the timeline. I vaguely recall the PUD meeting, but it felt so long ago I couldn't, and COVID, it was really hard to put that in time.
That may have been BC, I'm not sure.
It was, it feels like, I think it was pre-COVID,
Yeah,
right?
it may have been, yeah.
So thanks for the stick-to-itiveness and for a design that I think enhances this corridor and doesn't, there's elements of this that make it clear that it does not date to the historic district, but also is not completely out of place. I often go through the supplemental regs. I concur with Commissioner Sauvé that if one of the benefits is about pulling things up, that offering or putting in a maximum there makes a whole lot of sense, just in case something happens to this project, it would tie any future development to that. And it has no effect on yours right now.
I would like to say too, just because it's cool, and this was Shannon's idea actually, but the Historic Commission, we used to have a kind of a garden steps going down to that apartment, and they wanted us to change that, which we were happy to do, but we kind of took the inspiration from the St. Andrew's Church up the block, and actually I have the same type of stone. You can't see it on the house, but as it exists now, but the foundation is a cut block foundation for 1/4 of the existing foundation now. And so we're going to use that and build the masonry wall out front. And really the idea is to really activate that spot and make a nice spot for the tenants in the garden apartment, and also something that'll bring sunlight in and into right in that door there is kind of like the common space, the kitchen and the living room for that unit.
I think I think in terms of design, it's great. I was often, I kind of compare what we're seeing versus what's in the PUD regs. And I don't, unless I missed this is for staff. I didn't see anything about height, which I vaguely recall last time too when we talked about this, saying like, if anything, in the future, we may want more, like not tying ourselves necessarily to that. Am I recalling that right, and or did I miss that in the regs? Like
I
just
believe
bringing it, and this is actually for Mr. Chang for just a minute.
Chair Abrams, I was just going to ask, can you ask the petitioner to please stop and let Commissioner Mills ask her a question? It's directed to staff, not to you.
Yep.
Mr. Chang, in terms of there's no height limit in there, right? And instead it's kind of the floor area, is that the kind of the limiting feature here?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. And these are draft supplemental regulations. I have no problem putting in a 25-foot max front setback, and we can set also a maximum height on the structure. We can add that in there before this goes on to council.
I don't necessarily know that I'm not bothered by height. I don't feel like constraining that is super important. I just want to make sure that I'm thinking about that right.
I would add that I know one of the issues that Mr. Selby had brought up, that there were a lot of, whether it was utilities or density or But one of them, as Mr. Selby could probably tell you, we had fire department reviews, and there might be issues if you were to, raise this roof anymore, because with the solar panels on there, there were fire access issues. So I'm not sure even if he wanted to go higher, that he would be able to go higher.
I was going to say, I've got a list here. I want to know more about kind of your experience. I don't want to lose something, though. Let me go back to, I need to write it down so I don't forget it. Okay. While we're talking about that, I have the list. Water main. I heard capricious process, the costs associated with this. Can you tell us more kind of about, because there's been a couple of times I think since we've seen you, for the kind of pre-meeting on the PUD, where we have talked about how either zoning regulations or other development processes are impacting modest size projects, small to medium sized projects. And so I'm curious, some of those things we tried to remedy, but would not necessarily be in PUDs. Can you talk specifically about, like, there's something in the zoning ordinance that served as a hindrance, or when you talked before about kind of the other experiences, like, can you help us better understand kind of what made this so hard and long and expensive?
Well, first of all, it took a long time. So twice there was some new rule that came up that meant that that it was no longer viable. And so it went into this major, kind of like, oh, well, we can't do the project now because what was a rule before is now, or was not a rule before is now a rule.
Do you remember what those rules were?
Well, one was that we needed to, this came up, this is one of the things that made the project take another year, was that it came up that we were going to need to have low-income housing as well, which for a 4-unit building I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. And so the city's response was, you can pay $260,000 and get around it. That didn't work either. I'm right on the edge of being able to afford this as it is. But that took about 2 months to resolve, and to this day, I believe that ordinance was misread. So that caused a year delay as a result. And I'd have to go back and look at it, but there's been a couple things like that where a regulation changed. I think probably the biggest thing, though, is that, and I kind of get this from the whole pandemic thing happening to some extent, but I used to be able to come down to the city and sit down with 2 or 3 people and talk to them face to face, and we would barter it out and figure out how to get past an issue, and you just can't do that anymore. And it feels like everybody's in their silo, and their issue is the most important issue because that's what they do for their job every day, and I get that, but what ends up happening is that you have this person wants this and this person wants that, and they are mutually exclusive, and there's just doesn't seem to be the same ability for people to get together and say, hey, how are we going to solve this? I feel like this project could have been in the exact same form it was within about 6 months if we had had that opportunity to sort of go through these and say, what is important to the city? Is it that there's, room for enough trash containers out in the street, or is the landmark tree out in front more important? So it's just, it's expensive, and it's really time consuming because every time one of those things comes up, it's a couple months. And I just feel like there needs to be better communication overall.
So competing demands between different departments or different kind of services, is that?
Yeah, and I feel like there should be somebody that sort of is in charge of the process that has the ability to work between, say, engineering and planning. Things like that is where things go awry, and it's really hard to get over them now, especially when, you're talking about dealing over email, and it's just, it's easier for people to get dug in. I don't know, those are some of the things. I just, I feel like there needs to be somebody in the city that can take a project and say, okay, I'm going to put all these people together and we're going to figure out how, if this is important to the city, let's figure out how to, get what we need out of it and make sure that, that the person who's putting the project together knows what they're supposed to do. Because time goes on and things change. And then you're having to, go and redo your project again. And I've had that happen on this one too, where I had to figure out a new way to build it. And, all that's just expensive.
Thank you. One more question for you before I have a couple for staff. And this is, prior to changing the parking requirements, I at least, I don't want to speak for everybody else, was led to believe that it was really the parking requirements, parking minimums that were driving 6-bedroom units in the city. That because parking was tied to the number of units, it didn't make a difference if you had a 1-bedroom or a 6-bedroom, you had to provide the same amount of parking, and so that was really driving 6-bedroom units. But you don't have any parking minimum requirements, and we're still seeing 6-bedroom units. So can you help us explain why?
Well, I tried really, really hard to make all of the R4C requirements here. So the variances that existed were pretty minor in nature. For instance, the building does meet the height requirements for the zoning. And at the time when I started it, we needed 6 parking spots. Well, that's, what we have, so not a problem. And we had planned to, to put charging stations out there from the very beginning anyway. But that's where it started, is 5 years ago, there was a parking requirement. I don't mind having that parking there, but some people are still gonna have cars, but it just, at the time, we were trying to hew as closely as we could to what the R4C regulations were, because we didn't, we just wanted those handful of variances to be pretty minor in nature and, not something that would kill the project.
Okay, so 6-bedroom units are rentable. I guess that's the fundamental question. Like, before we heard, there's a bigger market for smaller bedroom units, but that's not, you're not worried about renting this with 6-bedroom units?
No, and, talking to one of the landlords who has about, 100 units around Carytown, this is kind of how he does it too. And he said he liked his 6 bedrooms best. This is kind of funny because he said that 4 is the worst because with 4, a tyrant can arise. And with 6, there's another faction that will beat the tyrant down.
Okay.
So I'm like, that's fascinating from a human standpoint, but anyway, that's where we originally got the idea from. He has a lot of success with his 6-bedroom units.
Okay, thank you. I think the rest of the questions that I have are for Mr. Chang. So, Mr. Chang, going back to the supplemental regulations, I just want to make sure that effectively what's in section 3, where it talks about the benefits, the last bullet in D, this building is to be a net zero energy, all electric building. That is what's that is required no matter what happens. That they're tied to making sure that whatever the flexibility in terms of the floor area, whatever the height, ultimately anybody, if we approve this PUD, the next person is tied to that. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then similarly, they'd be tied to the benefits of utilizing the carport and roof to install solar panels. And you're really explicit in terms of like the number of panels. I feel like maybe, yes, the number of panels. It was in section 4, it's clear about the number of panels. I just didn't necessarily see anything, and maybe I need to control F here, that like explicitly banned a natural gas connection. Is that, unless I missed that?
And we can firm that up in the supplemental regs.
I think that would suggest to me that it's not just, here are the goals, but like give that a little bit more teeth within section 4. I would feel much more comfortable with that. And that's the intention, right?
I will not put natural gas in a house that I build.
Great. And the only other thing that I had for you, Mr. Chang, is from, you mentioned kind of fire marshal, and in the staff report, there appeared to be some comments I think from forestry that it's still uncomfortable potentially with this. So maybe can you shed some additional light on how, from your perspective, what are some of the bottlenecks that this project exposes in terms of getting more projects like this?
Sure. I'll go back to it and just touch on the zoning. The underlying zoning is R4C, and so you'll see a lot of 6-bedroom units because our code allows for 6 unrelated individuals to live in the R4C. If this were zoned R1 or R2, which are single or 2 family, you could only have 4 individuals living in each unit. So it all depends on the zoning district. So that's how you're going to see why there's either 4 units in some that are proposed and 6 in others. It's probably has more to do with the underlying zoning than anything else to try to probably maximize your density. As far as with the forestry, I did have some discussions. From the forester's perspective, you could almost say, well, maybe this is self-imposed because you're making this a bigger, going from a 3,000 square foot, 4-unit quadplex to something that's 9,000. Well, in the thinking is, well, you're kind of self-imposing. You could have made something smaller and moved that carport, back 10 more feet so it meets the 15 feet. I put it, hopefully it was in the staff report, I think at the end of my discussion, at least from my comments, is, well, that's why it's a PUD. We're going to have flexibility so we can have, it's essentially it's screening from a parking lot. So it's just a surface parking lot. And if you kind of look at the elevations, the carport really does, if you're at ground level, screen from that parking lot. So I looked at it in the sense, even if you were to move that carport maybe another 10 feet to give you the 15-foot width, and you were going to, plant, some deciduous trees or something in there, I'm not sure you're going to get any more screening, but you're not screening from residential. You're screening from a surface parking lot. So I can see where the forester's coming from, but I also think with the flexibility of the PUD that they are doing the best they can. They are putting in a 5-foot sliver in there. They are putting up a 4-foot fence in there along with the carport to screen. But again, we'll have to make that decision. Would you rather have it, set back further so you can screen a parking lot? That's really what it comes down to. And I would say that I'm in favor of leaving it the screening, or at least the supplemental regs, that it's just a 5-foot setback to the east of the parking lot.
One point of clarification, I think when you started out by talking about the underlying zoning and, 6 bedrooms or unrelated individuals in kind of the multifamily districts, but we're creating a new zoning district here. So they're not beholden to that. So I'm curious, or are you suggesting that they're beholden to it because if they had 24 bedrooms in 8 units, so instead had 3-bedroom units, that would then trigger the affordable housing component because they would be exceeding? Okay. So you can't,
Yes.
so in order for the money, the numbers to work out, they can't exceed the number of units, even though it would be the same number of bedrooms, which is another thing that's crazy. I got lists now. Be ready for petition or commission proposed business. Thank you. Okay, just wanted to talk it out and make sure I wasn't being crazy. And I'll just say, so that people know why I'm bringing this up later, conflicting land use buffers haven't come up in a hot minute. I feel like not immediately, but they come up a lot. They have come up a lot. So I think that needs to go back on our work plan somewhere. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Abrams.
Sure. Commissioner Dish.
Could I, temporary Chair Abrams?
Yeah.
I just want to be clear. I have a different perspective. I disagree with what City Planner Cheng said. I want to be clear about the energy efficiency aspects of this. Those are not a requirement in the plan unit development. The only requirement currently is that solar capacity be installed. Because the supplemental regulations do not tie only this plan, that is, it's only referencing that plan, this approved site plan has those components, but if these are adopted, a new plan theoretically could come, and it would be measured against the supplemental regulations, not that site plan. We've talked about this previously, particularly when we're talking about a energy efficiency standard that is measured over time. I don't know that it's appropriate to put that in a plan unit development standard, because if the requirement is that this is net zero, the project is realized, and at year 2 or 10 or 20, it is not net zero. One, I don't know that that is a measurement that the city wants to get in the business of doing. And two, what is the consequence at that time? So if there's a desire to add a requirement of certification, I would really emphasize that it be something that is a snapshot in time, not something that requires an ongoing performance, which any standard around net zero or LEED, to my understanding, would often come into play. So prohibiting natural gas, an easy condition to add. That's something that can be definitely to be attained. And then just there was some conversation. I appreciate Mr. Selby's frustration. I want to own that part of that was me, the interpretation of the affordable housing requirement. My record showed that that was a conversation that I had with Mr. Selby between January 28th and February 9th of 2022, when this permit came in, when this application came in. And the pre-submittal, pre-petition meeting at the Planning Commission was presented to you on November 10th, 2020. So there was also a question about when that came to this board. So I just want to give some of those timing aspects as well.
Following up on that, thank you both for bringing that up. And I think natural gas gets us half the way there. Yes, it was a long time ago that we had this discussion, right? About net zero, about this? I don't know when the conversation was about the pre-petition.
Well, I mean, we've had it periodically.
Yeah. I'm curious, tying some sort of energy efficiency measure in here seems wise to me, and I am both deferring to some of your expertise, because I know that this is one of the things that you do, but also to staff in terms of is it like, what is the measure? AC, I don't know, what the blower door test, you want to get to a low number, right? Like below 2 or something, I don't know. Is that the right measure that we would want to use? Or, and maybe this is deferring, because I think that that's really important too. Like that the next person not just have natural gas, but that they do something, has a building that kind of is not blowing through electric heating if this one doesn't get built. So go ahead, yeah.
If I can make, any kind of recommendations here, passive standards are 0.6 ACH 50, which means buildings under 50 pascals of pressure and or depressurization. And so that's your leakage test to get to a passive standard. Personally, if somebody is not seeking passive standards, I would always try to get there, but anything below 1 is a very good result. I would also say, no natural gas, that's a gimme. And then, it's not, there is various softwares you can use to figure out your annual energy consumption. Can't do that with natural gas, but if you have an all-electric building. And one of those is a software called Woofy that the Passive House Standard uses to basically do the math on the building. And that is what I've used here. Now, one thing I do not have control of is somebody might decide to, I think they, it would be stupid if they did, but they might decide they want it 90 degrees in their room and leave a space heater on or something like that. I can't control that.
Right.
But what I can control is that we know that under these parameters of the building's operation, this is how much it will use, and we went actually 10% above that, but I'm calling it 5 as a safety factor.
Knowing that that's how you've designed it, cool. I'm trying to think about, again, how we can ensure that the future, how we tie it into here. So my sense is, I'm glad that the ACH, I didn't write it down. what is it?
ACH 50.
ACH, okay. That seems like a reasonable thing, but I also defer to others in terms of, I'm thinking back to the presentations, the webinars from the Energy Commission with the Passive House guy in Pennsylvania, right?
Tim O'Brien.
Exactly. So, and I feel like that seems like the right number. I don't know, Mr. Leonard or Mr. Chang, if it makes sense. It's less important to me that it's a specific like program and more like the metric that's associated with it. And I would also feel comfortable with you guys working out what the right number is or the right language after us. But what do you all think? Or what do the two of you think on that?
For my sense, I'm comfortable with that. What I would take that instruction is that the PUD regulations would be modified to include a energy efficiency standard. I would probably work closely with our Office of Sustainability and our building department to determine what that best point in time measure is. Yeah. And we would just report that out to the city council when this petition proceeded to the city council, that was added since Planning Commission arrived and the basis for selecting the standard that we did.
Great. Okay. So to my knowledge, just for everybody else's benefit, continue conversation, but I got 3 things that it sounds like, at least 3 things that we talked about changing in here.
Can I address it quickly? I think it would be really smart if the city would utilize some of the experts in this field to help them devise and design regulations around that rather than kind of doing it in a vacuum. There are certain parameters to any building, and it's hard to get a one-size-fits-all approach.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Leonard? Okay, Commissioner Dish.
Well, that was really helpful because I was going to ask whether the energy efficiency features were in the supplemental regs and if they could be. And so you guys just had that whole discussion, and I really appreciate that. I wanted to thank all of the participants in the public discussion, and I wanted to acknowledge that there are clearly different feelings about this project among those in the neighborhood. I very much appreciated hearing that you will be using curbside trash collection. So some of the concerns that have been raised about detrimental effect on the neighborhood may have been based on a misunderstanding about how trash will be collected. It is really important to value and preserve our Old Fourth Ward Historic District. But this building, it would seem really unreasonable to imagine restoring this building to a condition it kind of was never in the first place. So I don't even know what one would use to restore a building to a model of the 1830s when most of it was moved there in the 40s. So I understand the value of this district. I represent this district. I am so pleased to hear Chris Crockett call in and affirm the work that you did with the Old Fourth Ward, and also everything you went through to be sure that this is a non-contributing place so that you can modify it. We wouldn't be seeing you if that weren't true. We wouldn't be seeing you here. This is not germane, but I wanted once again to reassure Chris Crockett, if she's still on the line, that Kingsley is in the CIP. That's our capital improvements plan. That's where we schedule things we're really going to do. It's in there for 2024, and it's aligned with a water main replacement. And so that's probably a good thing for you, Mr. Stelby, because it's in your area. But she did raise that concern when she called, and I hate to let a constituent agonize when we do have an answer for her. So I was also going to ask about bike parking, but Lisa already did that. Commissioner Sauvé already did that. So I am thrilled to be in the position where a petitioner lectures us about the need to meet sustainability goals rather than the other way around. And I really look forward to seeing this project.
Thank you.
Commissioner Weiss?
Thank you. First, I just want to address the public. Thank you for participating in the feedback. And I didn't catch your last name, Ed McHenry, but if you want to send, or I'm sorry, McHoney maybe, if you want to send the rest of the comments that you weren't able to read, we can give you the email address and then you can send them in so that we can make sure that we fully hear what you had to say. And I want to thank the tenants for coming in and speaking up about the human side of development and what the impacts of our housing crisis has on you. And I just appreciate you coming and sharing that with us. So thank you. My questions, I want to start with staff. So if we can go back to the conversation that Commissioner Mills started with the zoning and the PUD, I just have some clarifying questions because I thought I was okay, and then our conversation got me a little out of sorts, so I just want to clarify a few things. So I'm in the supplemental regulations document for the PUD, and can you start by just clarifying that point D means that this is going to stay with this development, regardless of if this thing is built? No.
Under which section?
Under section 3. So, because I'm trying to get to what the benefits are, and are these the benefits, these 4 items that are noted, and would these stay with the development?
Those are the findings. The required benefits, requirements achieve the benefits are in section 4.
Okay. So only the items in 4 are going to stay with the development?
Correct.
Okay. So then, can either you, Mr. Leonard, or Mr. Cheng, clarify, I couldn't find in the UDC the floor area ratio for R4C. Is there one?
Chris, go ahead.
Yep. There's not a floor area ratio, although there's a minimum lot area per dwelling unit.
Correct. So what was behind the maximum of 10,000 square feet here?
So I gave a little bit of flexibility when I was discussing this with the petitioner. I believe it's a 9,000 some odd square foot building. So if they ever did some type of addition, they would not have to come in and do, some type of, an amendment to the PUD. So it's
Okay,
not
so
exact,
this
but that
is for
10,000
the
is within a couple
petitioner.
hundred square feet.
So this is for the petitioner to be able to do an addition without having to come back and modify the PUD?
Yes.
Okay.
I gave flexibility on the floor area, on the setbacks, on the drive width. I mean, not a lot, but enough that, if you go out there and if it's a 3.5 foot side setback, I gave 3 feet in case, there's issues out there. So yes, there's flexibility built in.
Okay, and then in the UDC, our open space requirement for R4C is what?
I believe it was 35%? Give me 1 second here.
And we're adjusting down to 23 here?
It's actually 40, it's 40%, yes. So yes, with the coverage of the impervious surface on site with the building and the carport and the drive, yes. And in fact, I think yes, that sounds right, 23%.
Okay. And then with the setbacks, so again, if we were using R4C, the setback is 25 feet on the front. And so part of the benefit here is we're going to bring that forward. And then we just had a conversation about making a maximum to this so that activation, if this development isn't done, stays with the PUD, and that we won't get anything that's set back more than 25 feet, which would assume that it's staying within the existing R4C. Is that
correct?
Okay.
Yep, we can add that.
Okay. And so, and then could you just clarify the driveway width?
The driveway width is approximately 10 feet. A multifamily requires, I believe, between 18 and 24. But if this were a one-way drive, 10 feet would be sufficient, but it's not. It's a two-way drive. So
And is that because of the fire egress? Is that to allow the fire trucks in? Like, why do we have that requirement in R4C? Does it assume a bigger lot, I guess, is what I'm wondering about. And so that's why you made the recommendation to make it less.
yes, I mean, the PUD does allow for, reductions, whether it is for setbacks, height, driveway, parking. The PUD does allow for those changes.
Okay. Okay, so then the other questions that I had came from the petitioner when the petitioner noted that they would have, that he would have the same variance of a 400-unit development on a 20-acre lot. And then I heard three prevailing issues. One was the conflicting land use buffer, which I think you are resolving because it's coming up against a paved parking lot as opposed to a residential. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then it was the setback on the north or the front of the development, which we just talked about. And then the driveway width issue. I think Commissioner Mills tried to ask a similar question in this vein around what the variances between would be, and that got into the conversation around the units and the parking. So we're still building a 6-unit, 6-bedroom with one parking space type of development, even though that wouldn't be necessary here. And that's sort of the petitioner's preference.
Are you asking me?
Well,
No, yeah.
yeah, I mean, essentially, when this project started, they were required to have the minimum of 6 parking spaces.
Right, but then that went away, and so.
Correct.
And so at this stage, this is because the petitioners decided to build it this way, that it is this way. It's no longer because of the requirement of the parking.
I believe that's correct. That may be a question for Mr. Selby.
Sure.
But
And then
yes.
you mentioned the part of our code that restricts more than 6 unrelated individuals from living together in a unit. As a part of your answer to Commissioner Mills, did you want to say more about that? Because I've questioned why that's in the code, and we've had 2 conversations about it, that there was a building code requirement or sort of a safety issue that was underlying that, and then I was concerned about, like, is this a legacy thing that was in our code because we were being a different kind of community when this was drafted, and we wanted to restrict unrelated people. And when we look even further back, we can see that this actually has a lot to do with the control of the movement of human bodies around in our communities. And so is there any more about that that you wanted to share?
Commissioner White, maybe I'll take a stab at that. So it is a legacy code. It is in the past and currently the city has regulated that who can occupy a household should be regulated. It defines a family and it provides an alternative. If it is not a family, it can be up to a certain number of unrelated individuals. In the majority of our districts, it's 4. In the R4 district, it's 6. So it is definitely a long-time provision. I think it's also come out of some court cases historically that challenged the city's definition of family at one point in time. So I think there's also some judicial background to that standard as well.
But none of that would be at play since this is a PUD and it's a different zoning.
No, the PUD could stipulate, so these supplemental regulations do default to the R4C to define uses. I think that occupancy would fall into that category. But yes, the Planning Commission and the City Council could choose to apply a different standard, but it should be called out if that's a desire.
Okay. Okay. I think those were the questions that I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Weiss. Commissioner Dish, small comment?
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify one small point. I wasn't being quite systematic enough with Miss Ely, who spoke. We did talk about the solid waste trucks. You asked the very, very good question whether the petitioner can deviate from net zero. And the answer, let me see if I got this right. The answer is that net zero is not in the supplemental regulations, which cannot be deviated from, either by this petitioner or, should this project fail, any future person. So the supplemental regulations are what you look at to see what is hard and fast. But in an effort to preserve as much of that as we can, we have just at the table tonight asked to have added to the supplemental regulations a prohibition on a gas hookup to this property. So it will be electric. And we have asked to have staff include an energy efficiency measure, which will require them choosing one and explaining to City Council why they chose the one that they did. So that's an energy efficiency measure. It's not going to guarantee us that this building is net zero, not guarantee, but it will allow us to monitor and know what the building turned out to be. So there is an effort to respond to, I think, your very fair question. Did I get anything wrong? Okay.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt?
Thank you. Thank you very much for bringing this project to us. Thank you also for your comments and insights on how challenging it's been to sort of negotiate with city staff. I don't think you're alone in this community, so we'll keep fighting. I just have a few questions. We got an email from a med student who is concerned about the construction noise as she sleeps during the day, but I read in something, are you going to be panelizing, or you're building off-site?
The foundation is panelized, it'll be installed in 2 days. The above-grade building is 15 modules. They will be built in a factory in Bay City and shipped here, so the building will be dried in about 2, maybe 3 weeks.
That's awesome. So obviously.
So it definitely decreases that. There will be a lot of noise and sort of that kind of stuff when we're doing the underground work and the earthwork, but after that, I think, overall, it's probably less than most.
That's exactly what I wanted to point out, that this, while there always is noise with construction, this should be a lot less noise. I was really intrigued by when you mentioned the program to train students. Can you just talk a little bit more about what that might entail?
Yeah, Builders and Remodelers Association of Greater Ann Arbor Bragg has a foundation that they've run for a long time, since the 70s, I think, maybe even earlier. But they have about 30 high school students from all the area high schools around here. And every year they build a home. And in years past, they would have lots, and they would build homes on lots, and then they would sell the home, and that's how the foundation continued. And it's really meant to give students who are maybe not looking to go to college or looking for alternative careers a way to give them some skills. I did go to college and had a laboratory career that I fled, and I've been so happy to be a builder. And so I'm a real strong believer in the program. The company I founded and used to work at, Meadowlark, has hired many of those people over the years. It's a great program. And, my goal is usually they're kind of focused on the studs and the nails and kind of building a house. And, having been a framer myself, it's a great thing and all that. But because this is a modular building, they would be more focusing on heating and cooling and plumbing and the MEP aspects of it, and also, there is carpentry involved, but really the idea would be to develop a curriculum that gets them ready for the next phase that we really desperately need is people who understand sustainability in building. It's not that common.
Yeah, I know that's not written into the supplemental regulations, but I sort of see that as a really amazing non-traditional public benefit to this project, is really helping train younger students.
And it's not a done deal yet either.
Right.
It has to go through, there's many members of the foundation, and this will all get voted on and things like that. But, it's something I would really love to, to get the students in there and, train them about how to do this
Yeah.
in the real world.
Great, I hope that works out. And my last question, going back to the 6-bedroom units, which I won't rehash, I have opinions, but I'm just curious, say in 10 years, there's really not a market for 6-bedroom units. Is there flexibility in the way that this is designed that, you could sort of, I know it'd be adding more kitchens, but, is there a potential way to redesign? Is there design flexibility to create more units out of that? Or do you see that this is it, this is 6 bedrooms, 4 units?
Well, I would say I've exhausted an awful lot of design possibilities along the way, and yes, there would be a way. There's 2 living rooms in each apartment.
Okay,
and,
that's right, I'm remembering this now from 2 years ago.
There's, the common space areas are meant to be, as generous as we could make them anyway, because I want people to be able to really hang out there and enjoy it. But as far as remodeling, I haven't ever really even thought about that. I'm just, focused on.
I know.
But I'm sure where there's a will, there's a way.
Are there 2 kitchens per unit? Am I remembering that right? That there's multiple kitchens, or is it just multiple?
4 kitchens. There's 4 units and 4 kitchens.
Okay. I don't know what I'm thinking of then. For some reason, I was thinking there were like multiple kitchens in this too. Maybe that was another project. What? Oh, okay. There you go. Thanks.
One of the things I really love about modular construction is that there's air gaps between each wall and between the floors. So you can have kind of like a herd of elephants and up above, and you don't hear much below and anything. And then even in between walls, there's a great deal of sound attenuation, which if you've been a landlord, you can, know that that's a big deal.
Or lived in an apartment building. So the way that it's designed, it's the modular thing is the 6-unit thing.
Yeah.
So it would be sort of hard to, you'd have to add in more
No,
walls.
you could totally do it.
Okay.
It would require probably a little more surgery than normal, but actually there's some benefits to that construction method that might make it, some parts of it easier anyway, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've been doing that for 16, 18 years, so, it's kind of like a normal home. There's some small differences and,
Okay. That's it.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Lee?
Just wanted to do a recap on where we're at. I think, just to recap, we had adding a maximum setback of 25 feet to section 4B. We talked about a regulation being added to make sure that the building should be fully electrified with no gas connections. And then I think that there is still debate with respect to should an energy efficiency requirement be codified in the PUD, and what are the measurable and punitive impacts surrounding that. So is that where we are right now? There's those 3?
My understanding was for number 3, that we would direct staff to establish an energy standard to be added between now and when the petition goes to city council.
Okay, got it, understood. From my standpoint, I would be in support of adding that maximum setback, as well as the fully electric and no gas. And I guess I'll just provide just a little bit of commentary. I think from where I sit, this seems like a great project. I know that it can be difficult to see change, and I think the historic preservation of a neighborhood is very important. So that the 4th Ward's, I think, endorsement is great, the old 4th Ward neighborhood. And then everything that you've kind of gone over, creating consistency in the rhythm of this particular building form down division and stretching out kind of like residential activity is pretty important. So even the extent on your water consumption, I think all is very helpful detail. I don't know if that should be mandated. I mean, frankly, I just want to put like the entire PUD kind of like narrative and throw it into the PUD because it's pretty detailed. I do, again, acknowledge all of the comments that we've heard tonight. I have to say, overall, kind of balancing of the things, I would be in support of adding maximum setback 25 feet to section 4B, creating a section for the fully electric and no gas on site, and I would say that I would be in support of this. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Mills?
Unless there's somebody else that goes, I think I'd like to make a motion to add those, formally add those 3 amendments as Commissioner Lee just articulated. Mr. Leonard, you have similarly articulated them?
So this would be a proposed motion to modify the supplemental regulations to add a maximum front setback of 25 feet and maintain the minimum 10 foot. It would direct staff to present a energy efficiency standard for the construction of the building for certification at the time of completion to be included at city council consideration, and it would prohibit natural gas connections to the development.
Is there anyone who wants to second that motion? Commissioner Weiss seconds the motion. Do we do a roll call vote?
First, see if there's any discussion of that.
Sorry. Thank you all.
Okay.
Discussion of the motion.
I have a question.
Commissioner Lee?
This would be for the petitioner, and this is pure out of curiosity. Fully electric building, what happens if, for heating purposes, because this will feed into the next discussion, if electricity goes down and it's like a freezing night, what next?
Well, the last passive house we built, at least my other company built, I don't know if you remember when Ann Arbor Hills lost power for a week, a couple of years ago. That house never fell below 61 degrees, and their only complaint was it smelled pretty funky in there. They're very tight, and without sort of the energy recovery ventilator, needing to ventilate the building, it will hold its heat very well. Also, there's batteries and solar, so I don't think I probably would have enough juice in the batteries to run a geothermal system that I need, in the size geothermal system I need in there. But it would at least, there are some heater, supplemental wall fan coil units that would operate. They only use about 150 watts, and so those would absolutely work. And I think, honestly, any one of those, one in each unit, would probably be enough to heat the unit.
Gotcha.
So I think you're safer in that than you would be in almost any other type of building.
Sure. Gotcha. Appreciate the response. Thanks.
Any other discussion of the motion? Okay, I think we're ready to vote.
All right, so this is on the motion to modify the supplemental regulations as described. Commissioner Mills?
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé?
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams?
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Dish?
Yes.
Commissioner Lee?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
All right, the regulations are modified.
Any more discussion? All right, I think we're ready to vote.
All right, so this is to recommend approval of the PUD zoning and site plan as amended by action. Commissioner Mills?
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé?
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams?
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Dish?
Yes.
Commissioner Lee?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We'll need 1 minute to bring Commissioner Gibb Randall back.
Yes, please.
are now moving on to item 8D, 221873, amendments to Chapter 55, Unified Development Code, UDC, Sections 5.16.6.0, accessory uses and structures, personal scale solar energy system to remove restrictions for installation of solar energy installations in single and two-family zoning districts, and to add a new energy section to Article 4, development standards that would prohibit natural gas connections in all new construction and substantially renovated or expanded buildings. Staff recommendation is postponement.
Excuse me. So as presented, these are two proposed amendments. The basis for the recommendation for postponement is that while one version of this was presented previously to the Ordinance Revisions Committee, in the format that these were presented in your packet, they were just published last week, and I think they're pretty big changes. So my recommendation is postponement to at least December 6th. To provide some more time for stakeholders and those interested to review and formulate any comments they might have. As identified in the background memo, our current comprehensive plan includes two recommendations that are applicable, I believe, to both the proposed ordinance amendments. One is to improve the access and increase the use of renewable energy by all members of our community, and to reduce energy consumption and eliminate net greenhouse gas emissions, and reduce the existing buildings and new buildings' energy use, carbon impact, and construction waste while respecting community context. These are recommendations that are in our 2013 sustainability framework, which is part of our comprehensive plan. And on top of that, as the previous agenda item was noted, there's been a lot of conversation at this table about the city's sustainability goals and that goal identified in our comprehensive plan. As I've shared before, I hear a lot of desire on behalf of the Planning Commission. It's not unique to the Planning Commission. There are other advisory commissions in the city as well that are really interested in the city enacting regulations that help drive positive momentum towards reaching climate carbon neutrality goals, as the city has identified. And I would further observe at times that my impression is that as a commission, you are frustrated that you at times are felt that you are having to approve projects that are not fully electrified and don't necessarily advance these goals to the greatest extent or to as much of an extent as development could. So to that end, there are two ordinances here proposed. One would be an entirely new section of the UDC called Energy. It would be a new 5.27, and as a reminder, the UDC is broken down into a couple of categories. It is an overview of our zoning districts, what uses you can do in those zoning districts, and then the next section is how you must develop property. So this would fall into that category. And it would set a standard that essentially for all new construction, substantial renovations, and sizable additions, it would prohibit future connection to natural gas utilities for those properties. The natural gas connection couldn't be maintained unless, for some reason, it was mandated by a building or fire protection code. My understanding is that there might be some circumstances where, to meet certain fire code protections, that the technology just may not be in existence right now to actually meet, and I'm not going to go any further. But the carve-out is when one of those basic code public safety requirements necessitates a natural gas connection. This would not supersede that. When options are available to provide those same services with a fully electric infrastructure, that would be required. The second ordinance is a bit of a revisit of the personal scale solar energy system. So 20 2007, 8, I'm estimating. We created personal scale solar energy systems in our UDC. And we went through an exercise at that time, and we ended up defining solar energy systems, and we actually ended up regulating them to a higher degree than we do some other accessory structures in the city. To the aforementioned comprehensive planning goal to provide as much access and opportunity for renewable energy in the city as possible, I'm presenting some language that would revisit that and seek, I think, to be clear, I think these would be pretty modest realizations, but the proposed changes would actually provide more flexibility for ground-mounted solar energy systems than other accessory structures in the city. Specifically, they would allow the installation of ground-mounted solar in front yards, including front yard setbacks. It would still require a minimum setback of 10 feet for those, so it's still not absolute, but it would provide some more flexibility for the placement of that. And it would also remove the application that applies broadly currently to both ground-mounted solar and other accessory buildings, that they can't cover more than 35% of the required rear yard setback. In both cases, this proposed language would provide more flexibility for these as accessory uses than matching or being more restrictive than other accessory structure regulations in the city. Some of the research, sort of jumping back a little bit to electrification, I think mostly, is another reason for the recommendation for the postponement at the Ordinance Revisions Committee. Some of the research that was requested I still have not completed yet, but some of them we have started working on. Generally, one question was, can our grid handle it? And right now, our best answer to that is yes. The grid can handle it. DTE is making significant investments in its electric grid here in the city. But at the same time, there are challenges to provide electric service to projects with or without natural gas connections. So that's not to say that there won't be costs associated with it. Sometimes electrification could result in a higher cost than a comparative cost if, for example, that electric power has to come further or from a more complex circuit. But generally, our understanding is that the capacity does exist in the city to accommodate this. Another piece of that research is electrification as a goal of the city, because as that grid becomes more renewably sourced, that becomes a more renewably sourced energy. Right now, electrification doesn't necessarily hit that to the degrees that we all aspire to. So I'm trying to get some more research about trying the evaluation and measurement of how that looks today. Not unlike EV parking spaces, though, I still think it's a worthwhile consideration for future-proofing development, even in the context of that decision, or the facts of that. The other piece of research is some examples from other communities that require electrification. There aren't any in Michigan that I'm aware of. However, there are some in some other communities across the country. So I'm going to bring some of the examples to those, but I also will be packaging those in a way that appropriately recognizes that we have to make land use regulatory decisions in a different legislative framework than other states. And there was another question about, I think I'm going to be looking specifically in some of those ordinances, which I have not completed this research yet, as to specific uses that other ordinances might specifically exempt or provide more flexibility because they're more challenging to meet an electrification requirement. I don't have those answers yet. Generally, I would, my summary of the discussion at the Ordinance Revisions Committee was relative to electrification, that this is a big question worthy of discussion by the full Planning Commission. At the ORC, I don't think there is a unified decision or opinion. This has, if the city were to enact this, it really does set the city apart and development requirements in the context of our region? Does it make, all things considered, development more apt to be located in the city, less apt? What implications does that have if we are setting a higher standard that is perceived in some way to be more challenging or more expensive or uncertain than surrounding communities? At the same time, we've clearly articulated those goals. As it relates to solar energy, I think that there was a lot of conversation about, I think there was more comfort in proposing amendments that just apply the same accessory structure standards that apply to all accessory structures. I feel like I am presenting something that's slightly more aggressive than that to the full commission. I want to name that at that conversation. I think that there was more comfort just making it a level playing field. The proposed changes here goes a step further and actually makes them, the regulations less restrictive for those uses than other accessory structures. So some more research to do, some proposed language that's clearly articulated. The last piece that I just want to make sure that it is addressed in the background memo, energy efficiency is not included in this, both in the comprehensive plan, energy efficiency is identified. In your work program, energy efficiency is identified. For similar reasons, I think the source of utility is an appropriate first step for a land use regulatory authority. When we get into building requirements of energy efficiency, I think that they are more apt to be regulated by the building code as opposed to local zoning ordinances. But there might be opportunities in the future still to look at incentivization, but this is very much an intentional breaking apart of those decisions because I think there's probably plenty to unpack with both aspects of that. So I'm happy to answer any questions, either from the commission as we discuss.
Great, thank you. So let's move on to the public hearing for this, and then we'll move into discussion. It's an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about these changes to the ordinances. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants to speak during the public hearing. Press *9 if listening by phone, or use the raise the hand feature viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available through accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone in the room that would like to speak about this petition?
Good evening. My name is Randall Whitaker. I'm the business manager for UA Local 190, plumbers, pipe fitters, gas distribution workers, and HVAC service technicians here in Ann Arbor. I wanted to speak about this bill specifically. I kind of stand on both sides of this, but I speak against this ordinance mainly because it's really too big of a jump too fast. And I'm certainly not speaking against sustainability and going green, but the very first sentence of 5.27.2 in applicability, where it says all buildings constructed after January 1st, 2023, no gas connections. Now that's a great idea, and I'm fully for it. My members work here in Ann Arbor and University of Michigan. We do geothermal, natural gas connections, of course, plumbing and pipe fitting. But I implore all of you to just think about for a second. If you really want to think about what this might do, as written, and I stress as written, go ahead and shut the natural gas line off to Ann Arbor right now. And you will find out what that means is, as this ordinance is as written, what will happen to the city. You can't just flip a switch that fast. Certainly work towards it. My members, myself, as an organization, we're on board with it towards zero emissions. But if you're going to flip a switch like this, it's going to have negative consequences. It's already been brought up, the infrastructure, the capacity may be there. Somebody may be telling you it's there. Maybe that's true, but you don't know for sure yet. And I can tell you from my point of view, what I see around Michigan and what I've been involved with, that infrastructure in Washtenaw County and especially Ann Arbor isn't there yet. Of course we can work towards it. All of you can work towards it. But again, this ordinance as written, I'm asking you all to, at the very minimum, postpone it. Do some more research, and especially just know that that infrastructure isn't ready for such a big jump so fast. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the room that would like to address the Planning Commission on this issue?
Thank you, Chair Gibrandal. Ken Garber again. You knew I was going to have to talk on this one. Yeah, no one's talking about flipping the gas switch off to Ann Arbor. Nothing is going to suddenly change on January 1st, 2023, or whatever date this takes effect. Gas will still flow, unfortunately, to the vast majority of buildings in this city, which contribute the biggest single percentage of greenhouse gas emissions for the city, much more than even transportation. I'm going to name some projects, all electric projects that you've approved in the last 2.5 years. Valhalla Glen, Viridian at County Park, 2111 Packard, Lockwood Senior Living, University Inn Residential, 1815 North Maple. These show proof of principle that this is possible in rentals, institutional buildings, and single-family homes. The capacity, I believe, probably is not there if suddenly every developer wanted to jump in at once and do all their projects simultaneously. But it's a gradual process. Projects come to you sporadically, and if there are capacity problems, I would hope that they could be addressed in tandem. There still may be an upfront cost difference in going all electric versus gas, but it's very small in relation to the overall project cost. Heat pumps are much more efficient than gas appliances in terms of BTUs produced per unit energy, and the higher price of electricity versus gas has now almost disappeared, so utility costs should be at rough parity. In fact, in our discussion with the Robertson Brothers staff, it never came up. There were other issues, supply chain issues, DTE, intransigence when it comes to hooking up electric, but not utility costs at the current natural gas prices. From a climate standpoint, it's insane to keep putting gas in new construction. We're locking in greenhouse gas emissions for the next half century or more, or we're going to have to retrofit at huge cost. I can't tell you how strongly I feel that it makes no sense now. There are no technical obstacles to going all electric. Yeah, there's DTE with delays that the Robertson Brothers team has experienced at other locations. I guess I'm out. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to address the Planning Commission?
Hi, I'm Ron Mucha with Morningside Group, and my purpose here is not to comment on the merits of the ordinance for electrification, but to speak to the language of the ordinance. So as drafted, I'm holding the ordinance, it's fairly broad, and I imagine that's because it's just the starting point of discussions. But it does say that the applicability is all buildings constructed after January 1 of '23. So I guess as you refine this ordinance, if it proceeds to actually become enacted, I believe that it would be reasonably necessary to exclude site plan approved projects that have buildings that have not yet been constructed as of the date of the ordinance enactment, were that to happen. And then specifically, just in the case of our own project, so 1140 Broadway, just to give an example. So that's a three-phase project approved in 2017. All of the site improvements, including the underground utilities, the easements, everything that was necessary, were constructed during the project's first phase. And for anyone who's not familiar with the project's current status, the first phase is complete. The second phase is well under construction. It's about half built. And the third phase of the project has a to-be-determined commencement date. So it's entirely possible, if not likely, that it would start construction after this ordinance would be enacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else present that would like to speak on this issue? Anybody waiting virtually for us?
No hands raised.
Nobody? Okay. All righty, I will read the motion, which is, this is an ordinance to amend section 5.16.6 of chapter 55 Unified Development Code of Title 5 of Code of the City of Ann Arbor, Personal Scale Solar Energy Systems, and an ordinance to add sections 5.27 through 5.29 to chapter 55 Unified Development Code of Title 5 of Code of the City of Ann Arbor, Electrification. Moved by Commissioner Weiss, seconded by Commissioner Dish. We are in discussion. Commissioner Sauvé.
I want to start by just offering a couple more kind of informational points, maybe, to the commission. So the Bureau of Construction Codes at the state of Michigan just hired a new executive director, and his role is overseeing the adoption of the construction codes at the state level. So as it's kind of referenced within this, Michigan adopts all of our codes at the state level. So Ann Arbor doesn't adopt a building code, the state of Michigan does. And so with that, only just this past fall, Michigan adopted the 2018 plumbing code. It's currently in the works of the 2021 Michigan Energy Code. It was previously in the works of adopting the 2018 Michigan Building Code. But with the transition of this leadership, they said we should match the Michigan Energy Code and the Michigan Building Code. And they're working now towards a trajectory of adopting the Michigan 2021 Building Code next year to match. They're looking of moving this pretty aggressively, since much of the conversation has already been happening, to be adopted by October of next year. So just to kind of give a line about the energy code outside of this ordinance and the building code that meet some of these standards. I would say one of the biggest things, maybe not in terms of this sustainability factor, but within the 2021 building code is also the inclusion of a new construction typology, which is like the first in 100 years in Michigan Building Code, which is mass timber. So there's kind of other elements that go along with it. But the energy code, of course, is continuously elevating. So I just want to kind of offer that up as like additional context to the types of codes that we're working with outside of this ordinance, at least from my kind of industry experience. And so I'll offer up kind of a couple things to both of these ordinances. I unfortunately was not in attendance to the ORC meeting, but I did share some of our application process for a project currently underway. about pre-submittal with DTE and the process that takes place. So we've been in conversation with DTE for 3 months now, and have only just now established that we need to borrow power from a neighboring circuit, not the current supply circuit, from a different substation. What that means is that that substation has now dedicated to a new neighborhood and reduces the amount of power available to the neighborhood based on that substation distribution. So at some point, developments are going to start continuing to borrow power and reshifting circuits to substations, and we will need to upgrade the substations, not just the circuits. DTE's timeline is from engineering development with the plan for a fully electric building and getting the actual work order services started, 6 months to a year to do that work, and $250,000 to move a circuit. I give this for informational context. We're happy to do it. But I think what I say in terms of this ordinance is that I'm actually really excited that it's here because it gives a very transparent process to what we're looking for instead of the uncertainty of the deliberations at this table and the concern of projects. And so while there will be, friction and a learning curve, at least it'll be a clear path for electrification. Instead of concerns about getting supporting votes for by right projects with a preference for electrification. So I support this. I do agree that the date is very soon, and that's given the timeline, that we've experienced with projects, that it takes 6 months to a year, and that's when you've started the project with plans for full electrification. If there are projects currently in design, similar to the previous project that we saw, I've got the same reason parking in 6 units it was designed that way when we had parking ordinances, and in the last 3 months, there wasn't room to redesign that in the budget of pre-development. The same looks forward here, that I'd really kind of look forward to maybe a date certain 6 to 9 months down the road from adoption rather than a fixed date that we're nearing as we continue these conversations towards postponement. I think those are kind of my general kind of conditions at this conversation at the table tonight. I support postponement. And then on the solar, yes. And I would say kind of two factors in terms of my reading of this is similar to a PUD, the public benefit for solar and giving more flexibility are matched. Instead of meeting the same accessory and setback, that this is a benefit and deserves the additional flexibility. And I see this as a great opportunity, especially on corner lots with a double front yard, to really utilize it where there's some difficulty for neighbors to have large sites that just don't have a lot of things to use on those sites. So I see a lot of benefit as it's drafted, but I understand that kind of public benefit flexibility is something that deserves discussion. So I appreciate some of the, research that's going to kind of come forward, but that's just, I guess, my industry experience I want to offer up and just appreciate this coming forward.
Great, thank you for that. That's helpful. I have just a question for you while you're going with this. In terms of the kind of newer building codes that are coming on, and this is sort of in between the two of you, how do these things how do they interface? I'm just curious how our local code interfaces with the Michigan Building Code, and I know it's something that's kind of continually being adopted, and we always seem to be several years behind it. I'm just curious, how can we kind of pull this off? Because we've always heard that when we get into these sorts of issues that it's not really part of our jurisdiction, so I'd love to understand how you all are threading the needle and how you're making that all work.
So generally, the state adopts building codes and they apply across the state of Michigan. Land use or zoning is adopted locally. So zoning is more of a laboratory, if you will, for a local community to prioritize the things that's important to it. I want to be clear, there are questions about whether or not utility connections extending to a proposed development falls within that category. I put some of the basis in that memo why I think it does. I will not be the only arbiter of that decision, however. So as those building codes are adopted, the interrelationship for them is as they are adopted at the state, they're going to be implemented here. I don't know in those proposed changes if they replicate this kind of requirement. I don't know if they know those answers yet, but the short answer is the state makes that decision for us. We make our own decision as it relates to the UDC. As I articulated, and again, just to reemphasize, land use law provides some specific purpose statements as to making land use planning and implementation to protect natural resources, preserve public health, and manage our infrastructure. Different state legislation says this is the place, the building codes that are adopted at the state level that determines how energy efficient buildings will be. And that's specifically why, it's not to say that there aren't opportunities for incentivizing those standards, but I don't think that there are the same opportunities to mandate those standards in the zoning code. And I don't know if Commissioner Sauvé would add anything to that.
I think the only other thing I would add, they get adopted, they're the general, like the building code is the international building code, and then each state may make amendments to that. So Michigan specifically, and I think this comes to what we're talking about here with the fire code and things, is Michigan actually has the lowest height for high rises. And once you hit a high rise standard in architecture, the reserve energy that you need to power for pressurizing your emergency egress and your emergency lighting and alarms and things like that needs to be supplied, right? And so at a certain scale of building, battery packs are not going to supply all of the emergency needs, and so that's like a gas hookup, or you have fuel storage on site with a generator. So that's kind of one of the things that, depending on the discussions in the next year with adoption, determining some variances from the international building code turning into the Michigan building code, and the same with the energy code. They all come from a similar platform, and then the state adjusts it down. The other thing, as energy code, mechanical code, electrical code move forward, is that buildings take more energy. While we have more energy efficient units and things like that, the amount of air recirculated for healthy spaces actually demands kind of more energy on the systems versus our older systems that didn't have to actually turn over air at the same volume that it does now. So it's a trade-off that many projects are requiring, upgrading their service to meet the current mechanical and energy code because there's just more requirements to it as well. So while we're actually saving energy with the certain systems, there's just more requirement to meet the higher quality of building standards.
Great, thank you. Other discussion? Commissioner Mills?
I have a long list, because I do, and it's not, I've tried to organize it, but it's probably not going to be all organized. So I'm going to start with solar, because I think that's easier. In terms of the dates, the solar ordinances left our plate in 2017, and it was 2018. And I got to tell you, that City Council decided not to take our recommendations, actually. And I, in my day job, remind people a lot about how it is not consistent. And so I am strongly in favor of moving to a situation where we are not limiting solar, making it any more restrictive. And I think the corner lot situation is a perfect example of where making it even, and the other even more permissive to allow for solar, lots more flexibility, I think is much more consistent with some of our other stated goals. So I'm supportive of the changes in the solar ordinance, and I don't personally know that we need any additional research on that. Like, from my perspective, I think they're good to go as soon as we want them to be, and then I will stop throwing the city under the bus. But until then, I will continue to say this is hypocrisy, because it is hypocrisy. Sorry. In terms of the electrification ordinance, I've got just a bunch of kind of random things. I think this idea of the language thinking through what we do about the projects that we have already approved, it is a legit one, especially in phased projects. I think that's really wise, and so I appreciate that being brought to our attention. The next one is to Commissioner Lee's comment on the previous one. So this is something that's used a lot, and maybe every house I've lived in is weird, but the circulation fan doesn't work even on a gas furnace when the power's out too. So it's actually no different. Like it's just fireplaces. Like that's the electric heat is no less reliable in a power outage situation than gas heat because it's forced air. And so unless you've got some kind of backup generation, in which case, yeah, there's the backup generation. And okay. Yeah. I mean, there's also our climate is such that our natural gas system is prepared for cold, but not every place. In terms of the research, Mr. Leonard, that I think you talked about with regards to the emissions comparisons, I don't know that I would put too much effort in that. In part, I mean, it didn't go far enough, but DTE just came out with its integrated resource plan, which does move up the retirement date of parts of the coal fleet. And so it is getting cleaner, and it will continue to get cleaner. And so, again, we know that this is the direction that the grid is heading, and that, yes, right now, it may increase emissions temporarily, but then we are not locking ourselves into additional infrastructure and the additional materials and that are needed for adding in another system. So the idea that we're just not we're not extending that gas infrastructure to that place and it's not quite the same as a stranded asset that we talk about in kind of coal plant retirements, but it's the same idea. You're adding a new infrastructure that is going to be obsolete pretty soon. So I don't know that I would do that research. The research, though, that I think would be really useful that we've heard about recently is whether there are hard to electrify systems. So this idea of kind of backup for when you've got when you've got an elevator or whatever other kind of systems, that I think seems like a reasonable exception. We heard the other day something about commercial kitchens and air circulation or makeup air for that. I'm curious about that. I would like to hear more. This came before when the site on the south side of town, kind of lab space. I think thinking through, that's where I would put any research time in terms of whether there are things like that really are just hard to electrify. But otherwise, I'm excited to have us move forward on this. I don't it's not, to the best of my knowledge, it's good that the energy code is moving towards efficiency. And I mean, I've been involved in a lot of the discussions kind of around this too. There's a lot of money coming from the federal government for the states to both implement the existing energy code that they have better enforcement on it, and to move to more innovative energy codes. So I think that that's really great. It's not going as far as, all electric though yet. And so I think that the two-pronged approach is really wise. So I'm excited to see kind of this come forward, and hope that we'll move forward on solar soon, and happy to get more research on electrification.
Commissioner Dish.
I would like to add one more topic, and I didn't think that was such a long list, but I'd like to add one more topic. And this isn't so much for research, but more for consideration. And I thank I'm sorry that I'm not remembering names other than the ones I already know, But I'd like to thank the representative from the Plumbers Union for coming. And I think that I would like us somewhere in our deliberations to consider the issue of a just transition. I think that some of the anxiety about this is too big of a jump too fast concerns will be not completely changing a job market, but we're going to be accelerating a transition out of one set of jobs to another set of jobs. And I know that when people, if I were to electrify my existing house, which has gas, I would be hiring someone from a union to come and change all my electric boards, because I'm sure they can't do it. I'm sure my house is not equipped for me to electrify. And so there are some things that the transition we're envisioning here, there are some losses that will be offset by gains in other ways. But I think that's something that we need to talk about, because one of the features of our sustainability plan is equity. And I think what we've heard is a question from the equity side. And I personally would be distressed if jobs that are currently worked by union laborers got switched over to jobs that aren't unionized yet. And I'm very glad to hear that you do geothermal, because that means there is unionization in the industry. But I don't care for grocery stores, for example, where their workforce is not unionized unless they're a co-op, because that's a different thing. But I don't care for large grocery chains that aren't unionized, because that's a really strong union, and we should be shopping there unless we're going to the farmer's market, which is a different matter. And so this is an issue that we need to think about, is how does this affect our commitments to not just sustainable energy, but sustainable livelihoods. So I would like to put that up for discussion. And I appreciate Commissioner Sauvé raising the concerns about the pace with which DTE will participate in what we're talking about, and the pace that we say we want projects to be done by. And I believe Commissioner Mills already conceded the point that we do need to think about projects that we have already approved and site planned, and that have done, created parts of their infrastructure. But even just site plans that we've approved, because that in itself, to redo an entire site plan to create an entire new, I guess these would be the guts of the building largely, I think, or well, whatever, it would cost a lot of money and time. And so we need to think about that, because we don't want, what if we, never mind, I'm not going to spin any scenarios, that would be silly. But these are things that we need to think about. There is another issue that we need to think about, which is we wouldn't be reducing anybody's carbon footprint if our more strict regulations pushed more development to the periphery and caused more people to drive in. However, if the whole state changes and updates its building code, we will not have to worry about that. So I hope that the pace of that change is speedy for our sake. And it's not something that's just something we need to talk about. It's not a reason not to do it. People may still probably want to develop in Ann Arbor regardless, but it's something we need to think about and deliberate carefully. That's all.
Commissioner Weich.
Just wanted to say how delighted I am to see this, and how excited I am for us to have this conversation and to potentially enact this change to our UDC. Since joining this table in August of 2021, I have been quite surprised with what I have described as the mismatch between our sustainability objectives and what we do at the table. And I have sent plenty of emails trying to reconcile those discrepancies and have been educated about how the codes in Michigan work and how local rule affects what we can do. And I'm just excited that we're actually able to do something in our UDC that sort of matches our sustainability vision. And I look forward to our future conversation and vote on this. And I echo the concerns that other commissioners have already articulated around the first question I was going to ask is, what does this do for sites that we've already developed? So if we enact this as written, does the village have to do all electric? So that would be my question for that. And then what kind of notice do they get since they haven't started that development? But I think those things will be resolved when we come back to our conversation in the future. But I'm excited to see this. I'm delighted that we're talking about this. And on the solar piece, I appreciate Commissioner Mills' comments and cheer you on. And I'm hoping we can make that more accessible to more people as quickly as possible.
Anybody else? Commissioner Lee.
Thank you. We've often talked about that tension at this table between legislature of what exists currently on the code versus what the climate action community plan is. So the fact that we are trying to address what we pretty much see and try to navigate here every Tuesday is important. So I think we're moving forward in a good way. And this aimed squarely at really reducing uncertainty about expectations of electrification. So I think that's important. I think we're also simultaneously balancing tensions between, economic development of additional housing and buildings and development relative to environmental sustainability. Again, not an easy balance to strike, but one that we need to grapple with, I think, responsibly. So some of the thoughts I had kind of leading into this, and I like the separation of use. As we kind of talked about, and first actually, let me just kind of back up and give a little clarity to what Commissioner Mills was talking about with respect to, really, for me, it's grid resilience is a huge concern of mine, right? I mean, over near Miller, we've seen those power outages go for days at a time. So I want to make sure grid resilience is there. Whether it's a gas-fired backup or a battery plant or a distributed grid that maybe the climate millage can help effectuate. Grid resilience and life safety is predominantly one of my concerns kind of going into this. Just making sure that we have redundancies that can keep people warm. Relative to, again, I understand, again, having economizers and make up forced air throughout a system. All of that being said, again, grid resilience is a concern of mine. Separation of uses. So I think one of the things that I think about when addressing this is the scale of a project and then also the kind of uses required. So a laboratory, a restaurant has different thermal requirements than homes. So I think that looking at it by a use case would be more amicable. Like, for example, hotels. Hotels, restaurants, labs, those are some of the uses that kind of come to mind. So, as well as the scale of a project, right? 24 units relative to 500, right? Different performas, different kinds of shared walls, requirements that go into it. So, those are the kinds of things that I think, again, this is very important for us to address because it often comes to this table. We ask petitioners, have you tried thinking about this? So codifying this does bring clarity, and that is important. That is our job to do. So I think that we need, in my mind, this is important for us to tackle. It is important for us to do additional research. I support postponement on this one. That being said, this is a very necessary topic for us to bring clarity to the community for. So again, in my mind, the separation of uses, scale are two things that we should think about as well as the concept. Oh, and really from the standpoint of also this seems like I don't know what the right word is here, but there could be additional thoughts or contemplations given to creating an incentive structures for this. So think about tax increment financing or sales tax financing, things of that nature, and specific instruments that could be brought to incentivize this further. So I'm looking forward to having this discussion. I support postponement at this time. Thank you.
Anybody else? I just have one comment and something to maybe think about that is not necessarily part of the ordinance, but I think as we've had the opportunity to participate in a couple of these webinars that have been really helpful resources for me as I've been learning more and more from the kind of architecture perspective of how you design these buildings, is that you seem to be really flipping the process for design in terms of how you think about these buildings, and that we're asking people to kind of switch things really late in the process. And that what I've learned is that you start thinking about your energy systems really early in the process, which is not what typically happens. And so I don't think about it as part of the code, but maybe that there's some sort of way for us to provide resources for people, because some of the webinars that I've seen have been really helpful just to kind of orient how architects and site designers and everything that we might think differently about the design process itself. Because it doesn't have to be more, it can be a lot less energy intensive if you can design it right from the get-go in terms of how tight the building envelope is and how you're incorporating energy creation systems from solar or wind or geothermal or whatever it is. So I guess creating a system that allows people to be able to learn and have resources too that aren't part of the code, but that are just part of a system of support to be able to enable developers and designers to be able to move forward without just kind of slapping it on at the end, but really thinking about how you may reorient your whole process from the beginning. Because that was very clear to me throughout all of those webinars, is that it's just a different way of designing, and that you're running your energy model at the beginning, not at the end. And you're thinking about windows and how thermal envelopes and things like that. It really changes. So again, not necessarily part of the code itself, but just a part of supporting structures to be able to make it so that people have the chance to be successful, I guess, is what my 2 cents would be on that. Any other comments? Commissioner Mills?
I'm curious if, from staff's perspective or from other planning commissioners, given that there are more questions about electrification, I don't want solar to linger too long. Like, how would staff feel? Like, would you still recommend postponement on that for further engagement, or do you feel comfortable moving that forward tonight, or, yeah, tonight, I guess?
So to be clear, that language wasn't published until late last week. So I guess I would still recommend that we postpone that to the 6th. However, I am hearing a lot different level of conversation about these two ordinances. So one of the things that I would propose is when they come back on the 6th, we split them so that if the commission is of the mind to take action more quickly on one than the other, as I'm taking a few more notes on the electrification, of course, my hope is to be able to successfully answer all these questions, but I think that there might be more conversations about electrification regardless. So, a long way of saying my recommendation still would be to postpone both, but when they come back, my intention would be then to split them, and then the commission could consider these independently, and then they would progress to the city council independently as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner White?
It's just a quick question about public hearings. Does this get noticed as a public hearing?
text amendments are noticed in the Washtenaw Legal News.
Okay.
And they're sent to our Gov delivery, which is about 2,000 email addresses, and to neighborhood associations. But there's not a mailing associated with a text amendment.
Even though it's a citywide change?
Correct.
Okay. So when we bring this back, hypothetically, we bring this back on December 6th, it will have been noticed prior to that. There would be a public hearing, and then we would do our vote, and depending on its approval, it would go forward to council, where it would have 2 readings, a first reading, a public hearing, a second reading, and a public hearing, and then a final vote.
Yes, but a clarification, it was already noticed.
Okay.
However, it's
Well-
noticed by title, and the text was finalized last week. I think that warrants more time for those that are interested. We will not be re-noticing. We've noticed both of these ordinances for this public hearing. Anybody who is interested in it had the opportunity to come. If you choose to postpone it to December 6th, those that we've notified are aware of that and able to track it. The public hearing will continue on December 6th, but there wouldn't be additional notification on it.
Okay, so I was confused because part of your reason for postponing was it felt like it was the noticing, that the language wasn't finalized, so maybe I was conflating the notice that we're going to have a conversation and the final language of what that conversation was as one thing. And you're now separating them to say, no, the notice it was done, it was proper, it won't be re-noticed, but we're asking for a postponement because we want to give the public more, stakeholders more opportunity to provide comments to planning before we finalize our vote.
Yes, and specifically, 3 weeks ago, we noticed the specific electrification language that's been present. 3 weeks ago, we notified the public that we anticipate proposed changes to solar accessory structures, making it more flexible.
Okay.
The details of that were not published until last week. And so there could be those that saw that, were waiting to see this language, and the time frame from it being shared with the public and you as the commission, that's my rationale, is that even though we won't be sending it out to any more notice, just some more space for stakeholders, the public, and the commissioners to sit with it before taking action.
And so then a follow-on question is, if we're using the Gov delivery, is there a way for us to notify those that are subscribed that this was postponed, here's the final language, and then we're going to it's going to be back on the agenda for the 6th? I know you publish what's on the agenda for the 6th, but I'm just trying to note that there was a change to do it. Like, is that something we can do?
I think the effect would be similar. It would.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, can I have a motion to postpone? By Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Weich. We don't need to do a roll call for this, just, okay. All in favor of postponement, please say aye. Okay, motion carries. All righty, we are on to public comment. Item number 9, this is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about any issue that is on the public hearing. We'll first call on individuals present to the commission and then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, press star 9 or use the raise hand feature. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. To unmute, press star 6. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available. For those accessing through the web link, you'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anybody present that would like to speak at this time?
Thank you, Chair Gibrando. Me again. I know it's incidental, and this is not a central issue, but I have done the calculation on the relative greenhouse gas impact of going electric versus going with gas. Even with DTE's current fuel mix. The city OSI calculates a conversion factor that takes into account that fuel mix as it currently stands, which is a very dirty, mix of coal and natural gas and a little bit of renewables and nuclear. But even with that, you are still, by my calculation, 50% cleaner by going electric, than going with gas to generate an equivalent amount of heat for residential. And that has a lot to do with the fact that there are upstream methane emissions with natural gas consumption, and also a lot of CO2 that's consumed in the fracking process. And the studies are out there. I see them in the course of my work. And if you include all those factors, even now, you're still 50% cleaner going with electric, going with heat pumps, as opposed to gas furnaces. And that's, as you have pointed out, that's only going to get more and more, that's going to get better and better as DTE gradually, although not quick enough, retires its coal plants and adds renewables. So it's a no-brainer to me to do it. Again, I know that's not an issue that you're worried about. You're thinking towards the future, which is completely appropriate. But even in the present, this is the way to go. I'm very grateful to staff and to the whole commission for taking up this issue. It's to your great credit that you're breaking new ground on this, at least in Michigan. And it's tremendously gratifying and exciting from my point of view. So, what can I say? I really commend all of you for going in this direction. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else present that would like to address the Planning Commission? Anybody in the queue virtually?
Just give it a few moments. Nope.
Okay. Item number 10, Commission proposed business. Commissioner Mills.
I'd like to propose that, Mr. Leonard, if you could add on to the bottom of the work plan for the
Commissioner
discussion.
Mills, I'm all out of note-taking paper.
I can tear off the corner of my paper where I've put 2 stars next to things. The next time we look at the work plan to see where modifications to the conflicting land use buffer fall in our priorities. And this is probably a longer one, and I defer to you whether this is something that the comprehensive plan will take up or not. But the calculation of density by bedroom or FAR versus by units would be, I think, help get away from the 6-bedroom units all the time. But we can talk about priorities later. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we are on adjournment. Motion to adjourn. Commissioner White, seconded by Commissioner Dish. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.